Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, July 26, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, from the Uber blog, Hullabaloo, Digby will be joining us. Heather Parton, for those of you who read her column in Salon. Also on the program today, Anthony Fontano from the Needle Drop will be here to give us an update on the scandal involving Mr. Rocky. And also perhaps to attempt to ever so slightly, broaden my musical horizons. Also on the program...
Maybe explain Ace of Base to you.
That's what I was going to say.
Also on the program today, Senate report issued hours after Republicans halt election security legislation show that the Russians were able to access voting data and rolls in all 50 states in 2016. Meanwhile, Democrats inch closer to impeachment. Automakers, the four top ones in the world, sidestep Donald Trump and make a deal with California to lower emissions than are allowed by the Trump administration. Meanwhile, Trump and Barr bring back the federal death penalty. Because, of course. Trump's slush fund to pay farmers $16 billion to make up for their trade losses. And Susan Collins may resign if we continue to hurt her fee-fees.
Dark money.
CNN and MSNBC plan climate debates. Looks like the DNC will capitulate. There are two big House Republican retirements announced over the past 24 hours. The Office of Refugee Resettlement says that thousands of immigrant children may be detained indefinitely. Federal Trade Commission lets Facebook off with a slap. And Ilhan Omar's potential Republican challenger may also face potential shoplifting charges. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, folks. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who are watching the program on YouTube, you'll see that we have a couple of esteemed guests here with us. There you go, waving from the gallery that we've set up.
All the way from Chicago. Josh from Chicago.
There you go, proving that he's from Chicago. Thank you for joining us. Quite a week. Ladies and gentlemen, next week, of course, we will be covering the debates live on Tuesday and Wednesday night. We'll be doing so through our audio stream. We will also be doing so, I think, through Twitch, right? I'm not 100% sure if we're going to do Twitch or YouTube, but we'll see. We'll figure it out one way or another. You'll be able to watch.
Other people got away with YouTube last time.
People did get away with YouTube last time, and this time it's CNN, and they seem to be a little bit less concerned, but we'll see. And one way or another, we will, in fact, stream the debate, and we will give you the opportunity to watch it along with us. There will be two debates, of course. The first night, we're going to see, I think it's the first night is Bernie and Warren will be on stage together, and then really a cavalcade of people who will be dropping out shortly after the debate. On the other night, it'll be Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, and that is looking like there'll be some, certainly the lead up between Booker and Biden. Yes.
Biden is, they're both right about each other, which is fun.
Yes.
Mutually assured destruction.
That's why that debate could actually be very fun. So you can join us and watch that debate with us. Don't forget, you can become a member of the Majority Report by going to jointhemajorityreport.com, jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you get extra content and you support this program. And, of course, if you have any comments on the AM Quickie, please let us know. If you at majorityreporters@gmail.com, we're still ways off before setting that out on its own in its own feed. Let's get to this. There was a TPUSA summit. This is the Turning Points USA. The Turning Points is the organization that Charlie Kirk heads. It has had multiple scandals involving explicit racism practiced by some of its chapters. It's all just the chapters. I mean, I think there's maybe one or two guys nationally. That's Charlie Kirk and whoever the Koch brothers have decided to install next to him to make sure he doesn't run off with the money. Candace Owens has since gone on her own. And I don't know if that was because she was too pro-Hitler or...
There was some upset even among TPUSA chapters about her nationalism comments.
I see. Okay.
Regarding Hitler.
Now, were they upset that she had walked back those nationalism comments or that she had actually said them in the first place?
One chapter was upset she said them in the first place.
Okay.
I think they're a bit of a satellite, though.
Oh,
If it means
kinda
like
racist to
protect
me.
your people and build
Right.
roads, it's great.
It's hard to know where exactly.
Also, we mentioned the Koch brothers, but Foster Freeze is really the turning point.
Foster Freeze, right? Yes, exactly. I'm sorry. Apologies. And of course, Foster Freeze also considered one of the last liberals, which is why Dave Rubin now works for these guys. Nevertheless, Donald Trump showed up. Now, did he actually
Isaiah
show
Berlin.
He shows up at the end of this
Oh, he
clip.
shows up at the end of this clip. Okay. So first what we're going to see is the video, right?
We'll play some clips from it, but there's about a 13-minute intro video that's sort of North Korea-like highlight reel of Donald Trump.
And everyone there is pretty excited to see this. Here it is. These are the MAGA hats. Pause it. You know what? Sorry about this, but that countdown and the grainy feel of the you know what that reminds me of?
Triumph of Will or whatever that.
Well,
Whitney
yes.
Riefenstahl thing is.
This is yes. It reminds me of two other things. One, it reminds me of The Man in the High Castle.
Year
Right?
zero, baby.
And also, I think I've told this story. In 2002, I traveled to Cuba with my then wife to shoot her documentary. And there was a statue of Martí, who was considered like a Cuban forefather, like a George Washington. And Martí had his hand up. Statue was down from the U.S., I don't know if they called it embassy at the time, but whatever, the U.S. intersect or whatever it was. And Martí had his hand up, basically saying to the United States, stop. And in his hand, he held a boy that represented, I thought from a distance, Cuban youth, like the future of Cuba. And it was a copper statue. So there was green all over it. I mean, it looked like it had been there for years. Martí was a figure from the late 1800s. And the base of it was made out of cement, but like half of it was sort of washed away, fully degraded. And that boy was Elian Gonzalez. So the statue could not have been more than 2 or 3 years old at that point. And so they created this effect that it had been there forever, that it was timeless. And I found that fascinating in terms of its propaganda value.
I think the Confederate statues had a similar thing going on, maybe in America. Like they tried to make them look like they've been there forever.
On some level, but I mean, they've been there for 70 years. I'm not talking like 3 years, and this was built distressed.
By the way, though, Elian Gonzalez is grown and sexy now.
Well, that may also be the case, but nevertheless, that's why you put that effect on the front of this video to make it seem like it is they're trying to place him with basically FDR. Like when you think of the times you see that in front of a reel, it immediately evokes a certain era. And they're trying to make him look like Churchill.
I'm stablemates with Churchill.
I was never in a wheelchair. Fake news.
Donald Trump was and is a child of New York. Born and raised in the borough of Queens to a life of hard-earned privilege. He was the fourth of 5 children born to a
hard-earned privilege?
Wow.
There you go.
In the borough of Queens to a life of hard-earned privilege. He was the fourth of 5 children born to a Scottish immigrant mother, Mary, and a housing developer father, Fred.
Housing developer.
Mark on his son.
My father was great. Good salesman, good builder. He loved to build houses. He was a good builder. I learned so much from him. And he was a great guy, a lovely guy. I loved my father. He described his mother, Mary,
he did horrible things to me.
As the perfect
I still loved him.
His father, Fred,
horrible,
was a millionaire real estate
things.
developer. The Trump patriarch has been described as a human machine.
Would say mine's bigger than yours. And when we took showers together, and then I learned how to do business that way.
He was a human machine
That ambition
who
was
just continually abused me.
in young Donald's DNA.
He apparently loved military school. He liked the kind of out front, I think, competitiveness of it. There were so many different ways that you could excel and get medals.
I loved looking around at all these poor saps who were actually going to have to go into the army.
He was socially popular with men
and I wasn't. What's that?
This is the part we don't want to talk over.
Okay. Let's keep, we'll keep quiet here. Sorry.
Prevalent in young Donald's DNA.
He apparently loved military school. He liked the kind of out front, I think, competitiveness of it. There were so many different ways that you could excel and get medals and ribbons. Donald Trump thrived, rising in rank, and he was socially popular with men and women. He also gravitated towards sports, or rather, winning in sports.
I think we saw enough. This goes on to show clips of him beating up the other people in the Republican presidential race.
We're not going to have a little dose of that. That was a lot.
If we have to have Trump,
amazing.
We
Watch
might
me
as well
humiliate
watch
Jeb
the clips
Bush.
of him
How well that
humiliating
holds
Jeb.
up.
But so he comes out, and there are, well, I mean, let's watch it. Nice car.
Rap video.
It's like a rap video.
Is that Skrillex? So good.
Oh, that's why they have 2 presidential seals, because one is animated.
Thanks for my rap video.
Well done,
This is
Jimmy.
peak capitalist realism.
Hashtag free Rocky, y'all.
And there's Donald Trump walking next to a seal, and you can see...
That's as much as you can see on this clip, and then we'll switch to the still
I can
image.
only think of sassy Trump when I see him in this kind of mode, just like literally sitting there, like saying, like, "Thank you, thank you." He looks so appreciative.
So apparently, someone at Turning Points USA, either purposely or probably just sloppily, found a second President of the United States seal that turned out to be created by this guy, Charles Lizotte. He is a 46-year-old graphic designer. He threw it together after the 2016 presidential election. He used to be a Republican, voted for George W. Bush. I think it's going to take maybe this seal does it, where it showed up. But he made this seal. It mocks President Trump because the eagle has in his hand instead of arrows, he has golf clubs. He replaced the United States Latin symbol, that is, or slogan, motto, I should say, with apparently what is a Spanish insult. And
does that say "es un pendejo"?
I don't know what it says, but I think so.
I hope so.
It replaced the two-headed eagle imperial bird logo, or I should say, it included a two-headed imperial bird, which apparently is from the Russian coat of arms, and apparently, like the Washington Post realized, like, hey, wait a second, that's a fake logo. Nobody noticed the golf clubs, which is really shocking. Like, I can't see the logo.
Golf clubs, that's just like an update of the seal for Trump's personality.
Yeah, can we actually make that the seal, though?
I like that, actually. That works.
First, fire that
You're
guy.
joking, but I think we should do that.
So
we should think
no
about
one at Turning Points USA caught it. And
Patriots.
oh, I guess instead of e pluribus unum, it says 45 es un titier, which is 45 is a puppet.
It's all Russia.
No
material.
puppet. Yeah.
No puppet. You're the puppet.
And-
you're the puppet. The one who redid the seal. You're the puppet. You're the puppet.
So apparently, Turning Points USA said that the incident was a last-minute oversight, the result of a quick online search to find a second high-resolution photo of the presidential seal to place behind Trump. Said the mistake was unacceptable. And,
You're fired.
well,
We've all been there.
yes. And we did let the individual go, the spokesman said. I don't think it was malicious intent, but nevertheless... There you go. That's the way I like that. That's the way. But nevertheless, we dropped the axe on this guy. We do not allow for mistakes that don't involve racism in this organization. If you're going to make a mistake, it better be racist or you're fired. Folks, can you describe your look in one word? How would you describe, well, I know. I mean, I'm looking around here. It's pretty straightforward how to describe the looks around here.
Summer goth, cat lady.
Right.
Energy.
That's what I would have said. That's more than one word. But and then I would just go from, well, I think Brendan actually is probably the best dresser in here. He has a look. I don't. What do you call that?
In high school, we used to call it
contemporary casual.
We used to call it trier in high school.
Apples and oranges, Sam.
I just.
Yeah,
I mean,
Matt
look,
has gamer.
Brendan's
Michael's
good.
is just
Is good.
basically
You're
Adidas
just-
sponsorship.
You're just not. That's plainly true, but you're not.
but
in a
however
position
you
to
dress-
judge
Beautiful in
things,
our
Sam.
own way.
However you dress, except for maybe Michael, because I don't know if they just have exclusively Adidas
Right,
wear.
I need to stay within my sponsorship agreement.
Stitch Fix has the expert personal stylist that can help you look your best. Stitch Fix is an online personal styling service that delivers your favorite clothing brands right to your door. Get started. Just go to stitchfix.com/majority. You answer some questions about your preferred style. Your personal shopper will ship you a box of clothes, shoes, accessories. There's no commitment required. You only pay for what you keep. Shipping, exchanges, returns, always free. Super easy. Plus, the $20 styling fee is automatically applied toward anything you keep from your box. So you get a credit. So it doesn't cost you anything to have someone who basically can ask you important questions and get you the clothes that you'll like. You'll never have to think about looking good again with Stitch Fix. Personally, for me, this is perfect because I cannot get.
Hi, Stitch Fix.
I
Can't
honestly
leave my home.
like it
Can
is.
you help me?
There is. I don't like to go shopping. I don't. Well, look, you are one to be talking about during a fashion segment.
Well, I absolutely am one to be. If you understood fashion, you know I would be one to be talking.
Adidas only. That's the way I roll.
Keep it simple. No bumps in the road.
Right. Well, I like to wear something that, adults wear. And eventually, when you grow up, Michael, you would too. And this is good because I don't know, frankly, what adults wear.
Tune in for TMBS on Tuesday. That's when you can find out what adults wear.
I don't know what adults wear. And this has been incredibly helpful for me. But you can get started today at stitchfix.com/majority. Get an extra 25% off when you keep everything in your box. That's stitchfix.com/majority. Stitchfix.com/majority. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're talking to Digby. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Friday. In fact, it's Friday, July 26th, which I had marked in my calendar to play this song.
Are you ready for some Digby? Yeah. Are you ready for some Digby, 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 yeah.
Not a lot of words, but it gets the point across. Digby, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Sam. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday indeed. I think we should move to 3-day weekends in this era,
I'm
frankly.
for it. God, yes.
But I don't know that we could. I mean, we'd have to get Trump to sign off on it. I think he would. But
we all need executive time.
Yes, exactly. So, all right, just give me, I mean, we did live coverage of both hearings, the judicial and the intelligence. Obviously, Robert Mueller, not so spry, although I'm not 100% convinced that part of that wasn't, part of the plan on some level, just, just to not answer a lot of questions on purpose. But give me your sense of what we heard over the course of those, 6 hours.
Well, I mean, I just getting the Mueller performance part out of the way, because it's really not the most important thing. I think he probably is out of practice, obviously rusty, and he seemed to obviously to be a reluctant witness. And I don't think it was just because he, was afraid that he wouldn't be able to answer the questions or that he was out of it. It's because he truly believes that it's out of place for a prosecutor to do that kind of analysis in public. There was a lot of criticism of Ken Starr for doing that, what he did back in the 90s. There was a lot of criticism of Jim Comey for doing what he did. The idea of prosecutors or, law enforcement officials in his capacity going, and talking about a case that he doesn't bring charges on, I think may have just been something he just didn't want to do. And it was clear that he was reluctant. So I agree with you. I think some of it probably was that he was out of practice and not as spry as you put it. But I think that there was also a strong sense that he just did not want to be involved in this whole thing. And it would truly, in a real the oversight hearings, you would have the actual witnesses, so Don McGahn and people like that, come in. But, of course, the White House was stonewalling. So they ended up, the prosecutor ends up being the voice of the investigation. That's not how it should be done, but it's sort of what the Democrats have been stuck with so far. Having said that,
well, wait. Let me just stop there too for a second because I feel compelled also to say this. I think that Mueller behaved cowardly. I mean, frankly,
Me too.
I think. I mean, with all that said, any physical infirmities or reluctance, like this guy went up there, and Comey had the same disease as far as I'm concerned. They think they know better than even their own policies that they have promoted for an extended period of time. And part of this comes out the most in the Sean Maloney questioning of him as to why he did not subpoena the president to sit down for an interview. He claimed that he didn't do that because of time constraints on the investigation. Well, everyone would have known that it was the Trump administration's fault if he would not sit down for an interview. That would be public. It would be in the courts. And secondly, he had said throughout the report that it was crucial to have the testimony of the subject, right? That it seriously undermined the ability to get to the bottom of this. But then he also said to Sean Maloney, which I think was was crucial and completely underreported, that they make a decision where they weigh the necessity to interview the subject against how much evidence they have already accumulated. And if they find that the evidence that they've already accumulated would be enough for a conviction, was sufficient, I think the word he used, then they would make the decision not to pursue the subpoena because of time constraints. So in other words, he found that there was sufficient evidence to indict for obstruction of justice, but the Office of Legal Counsel says you cannot criminally indict a sitting president. Okay, all well and good right there, but he states in the first 3 pages of the document of the report that there are constitutional means to do that. Well, he should have referred it to the Congress. He should have actually taken that affirmative step and said, I've found there's sufficient evidence to indict. There's only one way to indict a sitting president, and that is Congress doing it. So I refer it to you. He should have used those words. I refer it to you. And he didn't. And had he done it, the cowardly Democrats would have picked up the ball. And so they're both cowards as far as I'm concerned. But go ahead. Continue.
Well, I don't disagree with that at all. And I honestly think that, look, we're in an emergency situation here. I mean, which his report lays out. And, you and I and everybody listening knows there's way more even beyond the report that is, an astonishing abuse of power by the President of the United States, ineptitude, traitorous behavior. I mean, it goes on and on, even beyond what Mueller was looking at. So the idea that someone in his position had the chance to go before the Congress, and he's no longer a member of the government, he doesn't work for the Department of Justice, he could have easily said, if he didn't want to put that in the report itself because he was still an employee and he didn't feel like he could refer something to Congress, he most certainly could have done it as a private citizen. Yes, I intended this to be referred to Congress. I assumed that Congress would be the body that would take this evidence and follow it to its natural conclusion. He could have said that. He didn't. And you're absolutely right. It's like he and Jim Comey are two sides of the same coin. This idea that, look, we are here the protectors of the institution. Well, the institutions are broken. They don't work anymore, and largely because people like Comey and Mueller, both of whom I'm not criticizing them as people of integrity or honesty or whatever, but these people are just they're blinded. They're not seeing what's happening. I mean, look at William Barr. He's a Trump, basically a Trump henchman now, working solely on behalf of protecting the president and the presidency from encroachments from Congress. So this is a national emergency, and people like Mueller and Comey are sitting around talking about, well, look, I'm above all that. This is all
well, that's right.
Politics.
They're just protecting. They're
the right
protecting
thing,
themselves, and they're pretending like they're protecting the realm. That's what's going on there.
And they're not. They're actually degrading what little is left of it by refusing to just kind of be straightforward. It's all in there. It was all in the Mueller report. Those of us who've read it, and I did slog through it, it's in there. It's obvious what happened. I mean, we know that. And, I think that just getting back to the hearings themselves, that Mueller in the first hearing before the Judiciary Committee, he, again, because of what we just talked about, he had made a decision that he was not going to make that statement that he believed that Trump had obstructed justice. Well, it's obvious to a 10-year-old that Trump obstructed justice, and we saw it in real time anyway. On his Twitter feed, he's dangling pardons and calling Michael Cohen a rat. I mean, this was no mystery about the obstruction. There were some new facts in the report, but basically Trump was obstructing justice in plain sight the entire time. We knew that. Firing Comey being the most obvious and first step in the obstruction case. But it was the second hearing that was far more interesting, and I think that Mueller was a little bit more forthcoming, not so much about Trump's, about his involvement, but about what actually happened. And I suspect, and this is just me making an assumption, that he was much more engaged in that part of the investigation, that the obstruction side, that probably his staff had put together that part of the report and put together all the details. We all knew it, and maybe Mueller just said, yeah, of course he is. This guy's been obstructing justice. Put it in the report. But the Russia part of it, the election interference, the national security implications, and most interesting to me, Mueller was forthcoming on a subject I actually didn't expect him to be, which was the idea that Trump was subject to blackmail, that he had been compromised. He didn't say it outright because he couldn't, actually. That's a classified counterintelligence investigation that he claimed is ongoing, which I, was surprised to hear him say that. I don't know if he actually knows that, but he said it. And the fact that he, under questioning from Adam Schiff, basically agreed that anybody in Trump's position who was, it may not have been illegal for him to be doing business in Moscow during the campaign and lying about it, but it sure as hell did compromise him. The same way it compromised Michael Flynn to be lying, publicly about talking to the Russian ambassador and, having the Russians know that he was talking to the Russian ambassador. That's compromise. That is the kind of thing that happens. And we don't even know the extent of Trump's business dealings in Russia or any of that stuff. And it turns out that Mueller didn't investigate a lot of that stuff. He didn't look into the money laundering. He didn't look into the finances. I mean, he admitted all that. So that subject is still out there. And when we look at where we are right now, staring down the 2020 election and the revelation of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence yesterday, that the extent of Russian interference in 2016 is far greater than anybody knew until yesterday. I mean, 50 states, all 50 states had been probed by this Russian cyber hacking unit. This is a very big deal. And that is the part of the Mueller hearing, what we heard there, Trump being compromised, the idea that this, is a much more sophisticated and ongoing operation than we realized. And he's apparently, unless Bill Barr has, ended the counterintelligence investigation, which wouldn't surprise me. But now we know that this has been an ongoing thing, and that we are, we're very close to another election that is not going to be any more secure, and that the Republicans are blocking all the, any kind of election security legislation, basically saying, we're welcome. Vlad, we're with you. Bring it on. It's fine. Do it again. And anybody else who wants to help us, we're here to let it happen.
All right. Well, yeah. All right. So let me go back a little bit and just, I think, and we'll get to the report in a second. But I think my sense was too is that it wasn't so much that Mueller wasn't involved in the obstruction, from my mind, because it was weird that he brought his essentially lieutenant, as it were, for the intel stuff versus the Judicial Committee, right? Like, he didn't bring him for both. He just brought him for the intel. And I think it was that the judiciary was more about impeachment and criminality, right? And I think that's where he was like, I'm not going to say a word about that.
Right.
But in my capacity as an investigator about counterterrorism issues, which are not actionable in any way, I guess, right? Like there's no, I don't think he finds any type of impeachment fodder in the second hearing. And I think he felt much more free to talk. Like, he was literally more glib. He looked like he was not as befuddled. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they shot him with adrenaline, or maybe it was just like, oh, now I don't have to be worried about every word I say. There was one point, and I can't remember which hearing it was in, where he was being asked about that question of constitutional mechanisms. And it was a congresswoman, and I can't remember her name, but she was saying, what are those constitutional mechanisms? And he said, well, there's some. And she says, are you saying, it sounds to me like you're saying that it's impeachment, that impeachment is that constitutional method. And is that what he said? He said, well, it was the one that you just mentioned.
Like, right. He wouldn't say the word.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy because he didn't want any footage on television of the word impeachment coming out of his mouth, which there would have been. There would have been a question, what is those other constitutional methodologies? And he would have said impeachment, and it would have been all over television, as well it should be. And it just seems to me that it's not his responsibility to do that. Like, he thinks he's not being a political actor, but I'm sorry. When you say that there's other constitutional mechanisms and someone says you, what are they? And you won't say what they are, I got news for you, Chief. You're being political. And so I don't know. I found that incredibly annoying. But and let's be clear about what the Russians, let me put it this way. What we know the report says, because it's heavily redacted, and this is the report that came out in the Senate yesterday, that Russian hackers infiltrated local or state voting databases in every one of the 50 states. And as far as we know, there is no evidence that they changed any votes. I have not heard the same blanket assertion as to whether they simply took people off the voting rolls, which, as we know, is a fairly effective tactic. If you do it in the right place, there's a reason why we have X percentage less voting machines in districts where people are heavily African-American because they tend to vote, for Democrats, et cetera, et cetera. We don't know that. My understanding is it's unlikely they did anything because at the time they would have been very concerned about American pushback, that they were probing and that they knew that had they done anything more active, in that regard, it would have been considered extremely belligerent. And I think they may have anticipated, like, chances are we're going to have Hillary Clinton in office, and, who knows? But we don't have that same checks and balances this time around, right? Like, now maybe they would prefer, I don't know, Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or Pete Buttigieg to be president as opposed to Trump. But we don't know. I mean, frankly, I'm looking out there, and I want to put a call out to any foreign adversary who thinks that they can get in there and flip the switch for, Bernie or Warren. I would take either one if they're going to do it by cheating. Let's just let them choose, whichever they feel more comfortable with. I don't know. Could we get France or Sweden to do that? Would one of the Nordic countries do that? But this is a big problem, and the Republicans specifically quashed legislation to deal with it.
Well, it's clear that, I don't know how you can look at this any other way at this point. The Republicans literally are welcoming and actually want the election interference. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, McConnell actually said it. He said, well, the Democrats believe that there will be a political benefit to, he said, to use the words, political benefit to securing our elections. Yeah, because it would make them fair and free. And as a result, it would be of benefit to Democrats. I mean, he said the quiet part out loud, right?
Right.
that if there are free and fair elections in the United States of America, the Republicans are in a minority and they will lose. And that is actually, and they have discovered that this particular method of suppressing the vote, if that's what they're up to, maybe changing votes, whatever, is likely to benefit them at least as long as Donald Trump is running, right? I mean, I think that it's, as you say, other countries could attempt to do this, but we do know one country that is, has attempted to do it. And one of the things in this SSCI report was that while they don't think that they were probing these election systems to actually do anything in 2016 for the reasons that you cited, that, they assumed that would be considered a very hostile act of aggression under the Democratic administration and subsequent administration if Hillary had won. But they got a lot of information, which, there is
They mapped out essentially the networks.
What they need to do the next time. You know what I mean? They got a lot of information. And what we have done to prevent it in 2020 is basically nothing. They have not done any of the things. I mean, there's been some money spent. They've done a few things, but truly, I mean, if you are looking at this as sort of a cyber warfare kind of situation, we're not on a cyber warfare footing at all. They basically have just thrown up their hands, and McConnell is giving away the game. He's just saying we're not going to do anything about it because it will benefit Democrats to have a free and fair election. The end, goodbye. We don't need to know any more than that, which, by the way, is one reason why I am so agitated about the idea that the Democrats refuse to do impeachment so far, and, I mean, who knows, but that they're refusing to hold impeachment hearings, put all this information out there, not having Muller go, alluding, vaguely to what might be thing, but I mean really put it out there, because
it's a
we
country
have no
that
guarantee
rhymes with Usher.
Yeah, and we have no guarantee at this point. I mean, really don't have a guarantee that their solution to the Trump problem, i.e. winning in 2020, and then, we can put this national nightmare behind us. We have no guarantee that that's going to work, because we have all this election interference that they're doing nothing about. You can't rely on that to be they need to pull out all the stops to stop Trump. Whether or not they could get a conviction or not, they have to put out everything possible in order to reveal for the public what's going on. There has to be a massive, turnout in 2020 to try and, overcome whatever these machinations are. And we have no guarantee of having free and fair elections in the United States at the moment. None. In fact, it's pretty clear we're not going to have them. And the idea that the Democrats are going, well, we just need to beat them at the ballot box, and then we'll be, and then it will be back to normal. That's insane. And it's not, the idea that they think any of that's going to work, or that they don't need to throw everything they have at this situation, that they need to get this stuff out there and let the American people know that we are in this national emergency that goes way beyond Trump's Twitter feed. This is not just about Trump's horrible personality. I mean, that's bad, but this is about something much, much more serious. I mean, at the end of that hearing, the intelligence hearing, not the Judiciary Committee, even with all of Mueller's stumbling and bumbling, I was a little breathless because I'm going, okay, this is what had Mueller agitated. Even he was willing to go, slightly beyond his own sense of rectitude here to say something serious. He said, it's still happening as we sit here. And, and Christopher Wray, the FBI director, had said the same thing the day before. And yet we're just, carrying on. And Nancy Pelosi going, well, we just need to beat him, and I've got to protect my people in the Trump districts that won in 2018, right. And this is all. And I'm going, what? They're as deluded in their own way, in my view, as those people who are watching Fox News, propaganda is. In their own way, they're presenting a reality that is not reality, and who is presenting the reality, I mean, it's like, this is crazy. I mean, you see it on TV a little bit, people like you and me, there's some, Twitter and bloggers and, people like that, but they're, institutionally, the country is not, I don't think that most people are aware of just how serious this thing is. I mean, I don't mean to sound hysterical, but this is a pretty big deal. I mean, 50 states. And this came out of the Senate Select Committee run by Richard Burr, who, maybe he's one of the slightly better Republicans, but he's not exactly he's not just an Amash by any means.
Right.
So,
right. I mean, I think
fact that he signed off on this is meaningful.
Right. The narrative that somehow all of this stuff about Russia is, and look, I think I was never under the sense that Donald Trump was some type of Manchurian candidate.
No.
But the narrative that this stuff about Russia was simply cooked up to create, I mean, this would be a pretty big, well bought into lie that Russia did this stuff. If you have Republicans and Democrats in the Senate all agreeing, and, the intel agencies, I mean, this is pretty big stuff. This is, I mean, to believe that is, I think, akin to, you're in Bilderberger territory.
Yeah.
And that, there's a one world government, and we're all just here, and we don't realize it, but we're all just basically batteries for some type of major weather machine that is going to be unleashed, and I'm not quite sure where it goes from there. But well, want to be clear about something too. You don't need to get into 50 states worth of voter data to impact an election. Every person who works in, electoral politics with some depth of understanding will tell you there is literally 5 states and probably, 10 counties, if that many, where to eliminate 10% of the eligible voters, you've won an election, right? I mean, it's probably, the numbers are probably smaller than that, and it's probably less sophisticated than that. I mean, we saw it. 3 states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. I'm not suggesting that's what was done there. We see the Republicans do that voter suppression in public, right? The voter ID law could very well have made the difference. I'm not saying that Wisconsin should have been that close or whatever, but the fact of the matter is we have a highly polarized society. In 2000, George Bush won the election by 500 votes. And 500 votes out of 200 million people who voted. And so we have a highly polarized country. And the idea that you could take 5,000 or 10,000 people off the voting rolls in a state like Wisconsin because of voter ID, that's why you institute voter ID if you're a Republican. That's why you do it if you're in Michigan. That's why you put polling places in difficult to reach places for people living in poverty, or perhaps living or struggling in the middle class. And so these techniques, they don't have to just exist on their own. You can have an inside and an outside game on this stuff, right?
Right.
I mean, we'll do 5% of the work publicly. You do 5% of the work, privately, and there we go. We just won 3 key states, 5 key states, whatever it is. And I'm not suggesting that this happened in 2016, but if they probed it and they don't feel that there's the same deterrence. The idea that it would, that the president, let's say, would be upset about it. The idea that this is beyond, Donald Trump, et cetera, and these folks, I think is just, I don't understand how anyone could contemplate that. I mean, these people are, they're 2-bit criminals. If we're lucky, they're 2-bit.
Well, exactly. And, in fact, last night on Chris Hayes, Walter Dellinger, the former Solicitor General, great legal expert and, academic, he made the point, and, as much as Mueller didn't want to go toward impeachment, what he talked about in the intelligence side of it, and that Adam Schiff, who I thought did an excellent job, by the way, I should at least point that out. I think he really prosecuted the intelligence case quite intelligently, to the extent that they could even reveal what they know, right? I mean, there's a lot that's classified and that we don't know about. But, what he pointed out was all these things. The idea that Trump was compromised, and we know he was because of the Trump Tower, Moscow, maybe other reasons that he's compromised, and the fact that they have refused, he and the Republicans have refused to do anything about this particular problem. He pointed out that there doesn't need to be a technical violation of the federal criminal code in order to institute impeachment or to convict on a president, impeach and then convict him. And he said, and this really struck me, he said that a president who consciously fails to defend the U.S. against a foreign military intelligence attack for his political benefit is surely impeachable. That has nothing to do with what happened in 2016. It has nothing to do with the Mueller report, per se. It has nothing to do with what Trump did or, failed to do, or his welcoming the help or any of that stuff. It has to do with what he has done as president and what he has not done as president. He is failing his oath in every way by completely denying that it's as if Pearl Harbor happened and Franklin Roosevelt came out and said, "Yeah, no, it didn't happen." I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah,
this is an interesting time. I don't want to phrase it that way. I want to talk about. You're making the case. You're making the civic, ethical. I don't want to say moral necessarily, but the civic and ethical. Good government case as to why Donald Trump should be impeached. And it seems to me that what I find just sort of stunning, and let's just take the conservatives out of this, right? Because it really has nothing to do with the Republicans at this point or the conservatives, just broadly speaking. Half the country is not involved in this conversation, it seems to me, because ultimately, if the Democrats impeach, then they should leverage it against the Republicans in the Senate. But leave that aside for the moment. The argument about impeachment is happening between the center through to the left in this country, and it seems to me like, I was just watching, I like his work, but Doug Henwood on Twitter. Doug Henwood on Twitter and Nancy Pelosi seem to be in the exact same place.
Yep.
Which is, it's irrelevant whether there's a civic reason to impeach this guy. The concept of holding anybody to account is irrelevant. We shouldn't impeach him because we should focus on getting elected. Now, I think Henwood and Pelosi probably have different perspectives on how to get elected and whatnot, but that element seems to be completely taken out of the equation, which I think is wrong. I think we should hold people to account. I think the reason why we had, Iran-Contra was because we didn't hold Nixon properly to account, frankly. Even after impeaching him, he was allowed to be walked. And I think we see this on and on and on. Casper Weinberger, pardoned. We see the savings and loan. Everybody washes their hands. I mean, I think these things keep happening because there's no accountability, and that's problematic. But it also occurs to me that politically speaking, even if you don't want to look at that, this is complete malfeasance, because we have already seen what they're going to attempt to do between now and the election time. And from a purely political perspective, you should do this because it's going to damage Republicans and the president. And then from a good government perspective, you can alert people to legislation that we need to protect our elections. And I would argue it will prevent the Trump administration from exerting effort on stuff like rolling back the federal death penalty, or exerting, they're not going to have as much time to spend in the White House figuring out how they can make a legal argument to close down asylum. If it's all hands on deck, we've got to deal with impeachment hearings. I mean, this is just on every single perspective you could have about the question of impeachment at this point, civically, politically, and in terms of material benefit for people or preventing material harm to people. Each of those boxes are checked off.
I could not agree with you more. And to me, the political argument is exactly what you say, and it's obvious. Look, Donald Trump and his people, by the way, they are obsessed with this stuff. If they impeach, he will be impeded in moving forward with his agenda and with, Stephen Miller's agenda and the rest of these, these far right and otherwise, horrifying people he's got in his cabinet. War, anything. They need to do everything they can to stop him. And I will say, and impeachment is part of that. It's not, we need to pass messaging bills that show that we really care. Well, I think everybody knows that. We've got presidential candidates out there every day talking about all their plans and what the Democrats want to do if they gain power. This is not a conversation that isn't happening in America.
Plus, we're done with the messaging bills. They've done all the ones that Nancy Pelosi wants to do more messaging bills than put Medicare for all out there. She won't do that. We're done.
No.
They've
I know.
It's over. They've done the whole...
put their agenda out there. We know exactly what the House Democrats believe in and stand for. So great. Okay, we've done that. But I got to tell you, I don't think that 2018 happened because everybody was just really hoping that they'd pass a bunch of messaging bills. That was not why those Trump districts flipped either. That is not the reason. They flipped because they wanted the Democrats, they wanted something to stop him, to at the very least, put some kind of a roadblock up to his agenda and stop things like, we came one vote shy of repealing Obamacare, putting, 20 million people suddenly without any health care and nothing to replace it. People understood that. And they wanted him stopped. So they wanted his agenda stopped and they wanted him stopped. And the idea that somehow or another doing anything, they want to act as if Trump doesn't exist. They think, well, we just really don't need to give him all this attention. Well, I'm sorry. He's the president of the United States. There's nothing else you can do to, kind of distract people from Donald Trump with a bunch of messaging bills that aren't going to be signed by anybody. And Mitch McConnell just sits there kind of chuckling in the corner going, yeah, go ahead, enjoy yourselves, play over in the corner, kids. Because we know what's really happening. And again, I go back to this idea that what the Democrats are basically doing is kind of indicating that they're in a bubble and they're ignoring the actual political reality in this country, which is exactly what you just said. And we don't have any choice. It's not as if they can't create their own reality in which, I don't know, it's, Obama's going to be president and we're going to say, yes, we can, and, and golly, hope and change. That'd be nice, but we're in a different world, and we can't do that. So they need to be coldly rational about doing absolutely everything they can to stop Donald Trump, and it goes beyond just not passing a bill to repeal Obamacare. This is about doing everything they can to hold him accountable, put this stuff up forward. And I don't even understand this messaging stuff because, like I said, we have a full conversation going on. Next week, we're going to be watching debates with the president. They're not going to be debating impeachment. I'm not even sure it'll come up. It didn't in the first one. They're going to be talking about all the stuff they want to do. It's not as if nobody knows what the Democrats stand for. We're having a huge conversation about how far left we're going to go, what the big plans are. That Republicans are calling everybody socialists. I mean, that conversation is happening. And Nancy Pelosi needs to understand that's not her job at the moment. There's a bunch of candidates out there that are doing that job. She has a different job. She has an institutional responsibility.
I think it's a perfectly rational strategy. But guess what? We can now look at it and assess it, and it's not working. And exactly. and I want to make one more point, and then we'll have to go. We are only 3/4 of the way through this administration. The people who are there now, who are still there, right? We've lost 50 people from the Trump administration. There's very few actual cabinet members, who are not acting. The people who are there now are actually the competent ones. They're the ones who have figured out how to wade through this without stepping the tripwires. And I think Bill Barr is one of the most dangerous people that we could imagine in our government now, because he is obviously smart. He obviously knows where, who he's playing against, right? Like he ran circles around whatever Robert Muller thought that, Robert Muller had this notion of him as Lancelot, walking down there, being some type of quasi deity. And I'm not going to deign to dirty my fingers at all and believe in the faithfulness of the Department of Justice. Bill Barr lied the hell out of his thing, and Mueller told us that in not so many words 2 days ago. And Bill Barr is going to do whatever he is a henchman, but he just also happens to be a very smart one who got in there with a lot of connections and obviously a lot of credibility on the right. And there is a lot of dangerous things that can happen, I think, over the next year and a half that people are underestimating. Because you now have a lunatic madman, who is the president, who now has somebody who can execute what he wants. Yeah. And there's no, sort of like Don McGahns in there who are like, hey, wait a second, there could be a time after this, and I don't want to be in jail or on the outskirts of it. There is now, I think we're at like. It's time for us to just act like there's no tomorrow in this administration. And I think it's a very dangerous time. And I think Nancy Pelosi is completely, and I just want to add, everything I say about Nancy Pelosi goes doubly for Chuck Schumer, because I'm not convinced that Nancy Pelosi, the person that she thinks that she needs to convince to get in gear is Chuck Schumer. Like, I'm not convinced that Nancy Pelosi isn't afraid that she's going to lose 15 votes from the Democratic caucus in impeachment, which would be devastating. And I understand that would be devastating for the Democrats in the House. We all presume that she's afraid of Republicans saying no. Of course, they're going to say no. The question is, would there be 10 or 15 Democratic senators who vote against impeachment? And that would, I think, sink the Democratic majority in the House. So,
we saw it on the border bill. It actually happened. So
yes,
we know it's possible.
Yes,
Absolutely.
indeed. And I think that is a real concern. But Digby, we will have, sadly, more time to talk about this, or maybe happily more time to talk about this in the future. As always, I appreciate it. Folks, go check out what Heather is writing over at Salon, as well as Hullabaloo. Thanks again, Heather. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Sam. Have a great weekend.
Okay, you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye. What did I do there with that? There we go. All right, folks. I guess I'm a little bit worked up about this. But I really think this is an extremely dangerous period of time. And I think, with the idea of As much as this was about Nancy Pelosi, I think Chuck Schumer is really, could very well be the biggest problem that we have. The single biggest problem. Because if Chuck Schumer was out there, I'll just remind you, if Chuck Schumer felt he had all the votes and was willing to whip all the votes in the Senate, has he said a word about impeachment? This guy. Charlie Pierce wrote a piece about Schumer as well. I hope we start to see more of this. Schumer is horrible. And I don't know what we do about it.
In June 18th, Schumer wants to wait months down the road on impeachment decision.
And that was?
June 18th.
Oh, June 18th. Okay. Of this year.
Of this year.
Okay. June 18th, 2019. He wants to wait months down the road for impeachment. I think it's also conceivable because, we all assume, right, that Mitch McConnell would not bring this up for a vote in the Senate. I don't think that's the case. Mitch McConnell knows he's going to get every single Republican vote. I think he would probably try and make the Democrats vote for it. And it's quite possible that Chuck Schumer is so pathetic, so weak, that he can't even get his own Democratic caucus to vote for impeachment against this president. It's a real concern. He certainly screwed over Nancy Pelosi in that border bill, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Well, we know this about the centrist Democrats. They're going to be making compromises and accommodations right up until the second they get the wall.
What compromise? He's not even getting anything.
Yeah, I guess compromise is a strong word for that.
It's not even, it's like compromise implies that at least there's some type of negotiation going on. Chuck Schumer is just laying down, and I don't know that it's ideological, although maybe it's just, maybe you could tie a broad-based sort of argument that people who lack an ideology just enter into politics exclusively for their own power, which I think is probably true. But it's not his centrism that is doing this. This is a completely partisan, ideological fight. He just wants to make sure that he's just kept out of the line of fire, basically. He doesn't care. He just wants to maintain his position. And the way he, I think, instinctually perceives it is, if I do nothing, I can do nothing wrong.
Well, ideology certainly plays a role in that, his entire worldview.
I guess. I think, like I say, you could be a centrist Democrat and say, I'm not going to let Donald Trump win. Harry Reid, I think he was probably to the left than most people understand when he left. But he was not, I don't know that his politics are dramatically different in terms of ideology than Chuck Schumer's. Their voting records, I would bet, would be identical. But he believed you fight. That's the way that you win. Chuck Schumer, I think, is just like, well, I've got to argue that you don't necessarily need to fight to win. It just depends on how you define down winning.
Yeah, there are different flavors of centrist for sure, different tactics, different strategies. But you could not imagine a progressive Democrat behaving in this way.
No, because I think if you have an agenda, I think if you were a conservative Democrat, it's hard to imagine. Like, anybody with an agenda would do something. Like, I don't think that you championing bills about the legroom in coach. If you have
you flown anytime recently? you smug prick.
If you have an agenda, you will fight for it. I just think that his agenda, and I think that includes conservative Democrats.
You
could have segregationist Democrats in there who would be like, we've got to fight.
It looks like your coupons have expired. But Chuck should have been fighting
an agenda.
So we can't protect Sam's coupons anymore.
And I would say that I don't care what happens to them, but we're going to get the wall first, so I kind of do.
The wall?
Never mind.
What do you mean?
Like, fascism, When fascism comes to power and all the liberals get murked.
I think she's saying that Pelosi and Schumer are collaborators, which I think they should prove the opposite if it's not true.
Exactly.
Well, I would agree with that. I just think that they're collaborating less because of some ideological perspective and more because they just care about their own position in their own little institution.
Are there telemarketers in your fascist system?
All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, Anthony Fontano, the needle drop. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. On the phone, it's a pleasure to welcome to the program Anthony Fontano. He is the internet's busiest music nerd, obviously known for his YouTube channel at the Needle Drop. Anthony, welcome to the program.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. All right, well, this was very fortuitous because in addition to needing some help to expand my musical horizons, there is a musical controversy this week, which I could use some help on. Who is this Mr. Rocky that I keep hearing so much about?
ASAP Rocky?
ASAP Rocky. Why does he spell his first name with a line through the S? What's that about?
So many questions.
Well, ASAP does stand for it's a philosophy of his crew, the ASAP mob. It's always strive and prosper.
Oh.
And so that's sort of like their little motto, their acronym. So there are other members of the ASAP mob, like ASAP 12E, ASAP Ant. I'm sure you're also familiar with ASAP Ferg. He has a very good record called Trap Lord. I'm sure you've heard a couple of times.
You know, Anthony, it's a little embarrassing because Matt and I played all of these records when Sam did his divorce celebration party, but he doesn't remember any of them.
Yes, no, I was I preloaded and I was almost unconscious by the time I arrived at the party.
Yeah.
Am I in the Uber? Yeah.
The Juno.
Oh, you're right. Exactly. The politically
so
correct.
Wait a second. So there was the Aspire What, I'm sorry. ASAP.
Always strive and prosper.
Always strive and prosper. Now, is this? And I assume the strive is to get some cash. But is this some type of like? Is there some greater ideology behind this? Is this like what is that? The prosper gospel?
They're just a rap collective.
Okay.
You know, not too much unlike the Wu-Tang Clan in some respects.
Okay, fair enough. And
obviously, very different style, very different sound, and everything. But you know, they're a rap collective.
All right, and so Rocky from the Always Strive and Prosper crew. It's sort of like TYT, right? The Young Turks. Sort of everybody's like
yes, exactly.
TYT,
exactly.
Jank, and TYT. Okay, so Rocky heads over. Now, did Rocky head over? Now he's in Sweden. What did he head over Sweden with the whole crew? Or
to maybe make a bit of a cultural comparison here, it's just consistent branding, like with the Ramones. You have Johnny Ramone and Joey Ramone. You know, each one of them is a Ramone, just like each member of the ASAP mob is an ASAP. You know.
Okay, all right, fair enough. And so Rocky goes over. Do they travel together, or do they just over there? Is he just on vacation?
They're not always together all the time because there are quite a few members of the ASAP mob, but he most likely had some associates with him when he went over to do some performances, yes. Oh,
okay. So there was, it wasn't just vacation. He was over there. And they got into a fight. Now, I've watched the video, actually, a couple of times. I know people are going to find this surprising, but I did watch the video, and it looked like there was some guys coming over just trying to be, I don't know, they were definitely being nuisances.
Sam was watching it and he was going, World Star.
That's right. I was yelling World Star. And, but tell us what happened.
I mean, for your characterization of the video, as far as, you know, my view of it is pretty accurate. You know, it's just sort of an unfortunate thing that, I'll put it this way. There are a lot of rappers out there, and ASAP Rocky is definitely one of them, who, you know, brag or talk tough in their music, which is not, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's a long storied history of doing such things in hip hop. It's just kind of an established trope or norm at this point. But unfortunately, there are some people in the hip hop audience, I guess on the dumber side of the audience, who think that is like an invitation to test that person's toughness in real life if they happen to see them face to face. And that tends to, you know, lead to some scuffles, lead to some fights, lead to harassment, lead to negging and harassing and, you know, calling people out or whatever. And unfortunately, it sort of seems like that's what was happening in this moment. And ASAP Rocky, instead of turning the other cheek and just kind of going on about his day, probably just fed into it more than he needed to.
I mean, I think that happens with Michael, too, actually, when he's out and about. He's projecting all that image. And
I fed you the TYT joke, but I like that. I like the reversal.
They've got a reputation. I was there when the Vice Party turned violent with the ASAP mob.
Oh, is that right?
Back. Yeah, at South by Southwest. It was kind of nuts.
I mean, this is an old story, right? I mean, it happened even with like Houdini. Houdini would perform and always saying like how he could have people punch him in the stomach, and then somebody went up and did it when he wasn't looking, and then he ends up passing away because of it. So
yeah, it was exactly like that. Yeah,
that's what happened to Houdini.
I think it's very different, but that's pretty depressing.
Yeah. It's not that different. I mean, you project an image. You project an image, and you know, casual. You know, the civilian, the civvy population.
I'm
wants to
actually
come
really
and test
appreciating some like odd-looking guys in Brooklyn going, "Can you do Nation of Islam Obama for me?" Sounds a lot nicer.
So, but this is where it starts getting weird. So the Swedish officials charge ASAP Rocky and I imagine some of his crew that were with him with assault because he did beat up these guys, you know, and then what happens?
Well, it seems like he's facing some pretty serious time now and a serious charge. And I think what I would like maybe for rappers to understand. And I'm not obviously an ambassador for the hip hop community or anything like that, but as the profile of hip hop has grown to such an international level, when these offers do occur where you can go overseas and you can perform, you have to understand that the judicial system over there, the racial biases that are over here also exist over there. And on top of that, I would say they exist doubly, because not only are they going to be treating you as a person of color, but they're going to be treating you as a foreigner as well. And I mean, there are already sorts of all kinds of biases against Americans in European countries. And not to say that some of them are unfounded, that we're rude, that we don't know how to handle ourselves, that, just generally anti-American sentiments of just Europeans being annoyed with us. And obviously those attitudes are going to be taken out in a place like the courtroom. And, so what I would try to argue is that, look, when you're over there, something like this does happen. It's not worth it. I mean, recently there was another video that came up of just this random European dude beating up, I guess, one of the bodyguards of the rapper Future. And, unfortunately, this is just kind of like a nasty reality that I think some of these rappers are having to deal with. The idea of a rapper being jumped in public is nothing new. It's happened to some of the best of them, even voices like 2 Chainz. But I would say the dangers of responding to such an attack are even greater when you're in a country that's not your own.
Interesting.
Sidebar, 2 Chainz on Nancy Grace was the best thing ever, and I think we should all watch it today.
That was a very fun clip.
All right. Well, okay. So he's looking at some real time.
Well, he was in solitary confinement.
Oh, it's
already like over the past couple of weeks, it's already been an incredible, a pretty extravagant violation of his rights. And as an example, like in the UK a couple years ago, like there was something with Snoop Dogg and his and they let them out of the country. I mean, this is, I agree that this is a broader problem, but the Swedes have handled this in a pretty shockingly draconian way.
Well, it almost feels like Donald Trump decided to jump in on this and said, let's see how bad we can make this. So what happens? So Rocky's, facing severe jail time. And how does Donald Trump weigh in on this? I mean, I know what the theory is, that Donald Trump wants to show that he's actually a friend of black people.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we remember the first tweet that initiated this from all of him, we have to recall that that the message of this, according to Trump, came from Kanye. Kanye somehow got him on the phone, and Trump described the whole situation as Kanye says his friend A$AP Rocky, he's over there, and this needs to be handled. This needs to be taken care of, and the connection between Trump and Kanye is already something that the hip hop community is and has consistently been groaning over for a very long time. And even though there are people in the industry that would very much love to see Rocky free, because he's still a very popular artist who, if he continues to drop records, is set to continue making millions and millions of dollars and generate tons of money for the record label and other people in the industry. Most people in the hip hop community are looking at this quote unquote attempt by Donald Trump to get him out. They're looking at it very skeptically. They're seeing it as a transparent attempt to try to win them over, and they're not buying it as much as they would like for it to happen.
And I feel like on some level, it's not going to help Rocky to have Donald Trump publicly out there making it. Do you think it is going to?
Well, I mean, arguably there's been certain things like with the Pakistanis or even to some extent, I think something like this, when it's an incredibly low cost thing for them to do, to have him not be a relentless pain in the ass about other potentially larger things. Yeah, it could help. Yes.
Interesting.
I'll say that even a little bit of Trump pressure to try to get him out, I think, is better than absolutely no pressure whatsoever, which is essentially what was being applied before this. But given his track record of making deals, I don't think anybody is sort of really holding their breath on Trump, like, basically going full negotiator, or even like sending some SEALs over there, Zero Dark 30 style, and like just breaking them out.
Did you see the latest tweet he sent out? He wrote, the first one is ridiculous, but I'll read the one that's just pretty funny. He wrote, give ASAP, which he spells correctly, by the way, Sam. Give ASAP.
With the dollar sign?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Give ASAP his freedom, all capitalized. We do so much for Sweden, but it doesn't seem to work the other way around. Sweden should focus on its real crime problem. # free Rocky.
Does he mean Muslims by that?
He's doing multiple. Yeah, he's doing multiple free Rocky hashtags.
Where's Nancy Pelosi on this?
Right.
I mean, actually, honestly, frankly, I don't know who A$AP Rocky's congressperson is, but where is A$AP Rocky's congressperson?
Well, I wonder if this hurts, like State Department actually going and saying, hey, like they would for any, private individual. I wonder if it hurts, because the more I think sort of like a publicity it gets, the more pressure it puts on the Swedes to actually not capitulate to Donald Trump, I would imagine. Right? I mean, I
think the fact that he's kind of turning this into a media fiasco, it just kind of goes to show how unserious he is about the whole thing, because the likelihood of it panning out the way that he wants in this very public way is just going to make Sweden look like they're caving in, looking weak. Whereas if these negotiations were quiet behind closed doors, and as you jokingly alluded to a little while ago, maybe send a congressperson over there or something, in a show of good faith, I feel like that approach would be more likely to get the outcome we want. But Donald Trump is unable to approach things in that manner.
Anthony, we're having a little bit of problems with your phone. If you shift back over to where you were leaning just moments ago.
I apologize.
Oh, now you're better. All right. Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see. I don't know. Personally, I think that if I had the opportunity to maybe Kanye, I would call up Kanye and say, dude, get your buddy to just back off a little bit, because I don't think I would hate to have my future tied to Donald Trump's in any way. That would be, I think, slightly problematic for most people. But all right, well, let's turn. I have a broad question before we get to my sort of my musical makeover a little bit, as it were.
Wow.
Where are we in terms of music being political of the moment? I mean, I think in the context of rap and R&B, I think it's been political it's really been, it seems to me, largely I don't want to say the only source of political music, because I feel like during the Bush years there was music that Bright Eyes and Dixie Chicks and Cowboy Junkies. I mean, I seem to remember some things that were sort of overtly political, and I think obviously in rap
we also had I don't know if Mike or Jamie remember these, but we also had the Fat Wreck Chords Rock Against Bush compilation.
Indeed.
Okay. And
also Green Day American Idiot. You can't forget that.
Yeah,
I mean, during musical now.
Yeah, that album was so awesome. I listened every day.
Green Day was a little bit modern for me.
Yeah.
But
these guys are so cool.
But where are we now? Like, I don't feel like we have. I mean, I don't know. I don't pay attention to music enough as to what's good. But where are we on that? I imagine that's sort of like that cycle.
I think it's there and it's not. I mean, you have artists out there who have essentially made it their brand in a way to discuss social issues in their music, whether it be a Kendrick Lamar or a Childish Gambino. I mean, his song "This Is America" last year was my single of the year. So these issues are definitely being discussed by prominent musicians and artists and figures, but simultaneously, the music industry and music careers in general are so volatile, especially in the age of streaming, that most musicians don't want to take the risk to talk about issues that they think or that they know are important because they don't want to put themselves in a situation where they either say something that they get backlash for because, obviously all of them want to avoid the whole cancel culture thing, but simultaneously they don't want to risk their audiences tuning out, and they lose money, they lose their record deal. Because a lot of these artists, they aren't being signed for multi-album deals anymore. It's really just kind of like on a relevancy basis these days, because artists are fading in and out of the picture all the time, and trends are moving at the speed of light thanks to the internet. So as a result, again, I feel like a lot of artists, not only just politically, but also musically in a lot of respects, are just very risk averse.
How has the business of music changed in this era? Because it's funny because the only thing I have it to compare to is sort of the comedy world, and the comedy business has changed dramatically because of all this. Like, there's a lot more streaming services, so there's a lot more opportunity for work. You don't get these big paydays that we got back in the late 90s. Where it's like, hey, this is like winning the lottery, but the ability to make a decent middle class living seems much more within arm's reach, because you can monetize yourself online with like YouTube, or you can tour. There's just more ways to sort of like be entrepreneurial. What's happening in music in that respect?
I'll say generally, much of what you've just described in comedy has also occurred in music. I will add on top of that, what's also occurred is that the record labels for a long time, like, cried wolf over streaming and digital downloads, destroying the industry and ruining music, and this is going to be the end of the industry as we know it. But now, somehow, because obviously they've gamed the system and they have, worked out the kinds of deals that are preferable to them with streaming services, the major labels are now making billion-dollar profits and making record profits. So there is that. Simultaneously, it seems like, yes, there are more artists who are in the underground or relative underground that are making maybe more modest livings, but there are a lot of artists still in the underground that are struggling and can't really seem to get ahead, because there's really only a certain kind of song and format that works really well in the streaming age. You know what I mean? If you're an artist that writes, 20-minute long songs, or like long classical pieces, or really long ambient pieces, or something like that, the likelihood that you're going to make as much money as somebody who's like writing 12 3-minute pop songs and slapping them on a record is not likely, because you're getting paid per stream these days. So if you write really, experimental or long form music, you're kind of kneecapping yourself in a way.
So you don't get paid per minute?
No, you get paid per stream. That's why these days a lot of these rappers, that some of which we were talking about earlier, what they're doing these days, and this is kind of a weird, crazy incentive, they're dropping these like 90-minute, 45, 30 song projects that's just like one track after another that they're busting out in the studio, maybe spending 20 to 45 minutes on each track, because they know they're going to make more money if they put more songs to stream on a record, regardless of how they play together as an album. That's
sort of like the difference between me and Mark Maron. He's just basically playing to where the cash is, and I'm sorry. But that's fascinating. I mean, it's so, it's interesting. It's fascinating to see how the way things are monetized in a very sort of practical, sort of agnostic mechanisms implicate the art that gets created.
Yeah, and it's if we could go back and analyze it more thoroughly, it's probably always done that to some degree, but these are the noticeable ways in which I can, sort of recognize those changes happening, because I'm living through these changes and observing them from a point in time when streaming was not a thing, and to now where streaming is the dominant format through which young people, consume the music that they want to listen to.
So it's interesting that you say that politics haven't been real big in music, because I mean, I was always in more of the indie sphere, but I do still get some press emails from my previous life as a music journalist. And I feel like a lot of, at least indie artists, are trying to kind of cash in on this sudden resistance fervor that everybody's feeling right now in maybe kind of a, not shallow, but like a bit of a naive way, people who weren't really that political before.
Do you have an example? I mean, I could think of maybe a few. I mean, I really didn't like that that weird Hillary song that like Le Tigre came out with a little while ago. But
kill me.
Is there like another prominent example?
Sam liked that, Anthony. So just be a little polite.
I mean,
I listened to that on a loop. That's my entire Spotify playlist.
Oh my God. I
It's not
gotta
necessarily
say,
that I like Hillary even. It's just the spirit of the music.
I recently got a chance to see Bikini Kill play in Brooklyn, and I almost couldn't make myself go because Le Tigre had released that I'm With Her video.
Yeah.
But I did go, and I enjoyed it very much.
That's sort of like my generation, right? I mean, is that what the problem is? My generation? Again?
I will say, I think like certainly in the punk world, people have been making some really great, I feel like resistance has been ruined, but like resistance art for quite some time now. And Zach Lipez has talked about this a lot too. You probably know him, Anthony. Like the people who are doing well at it right now are the ones who have been doing it all along. And it's not just something that they've picked up. Like Downtown Boys, Priests, and Idols are three really good punk bands who have strong leftist political themes, and I really like them a lot.
Yeah, Joy as an Act of Resistance was one of my favorites of the year. I mean, punk music commenting on politics is just sort of a constant, no matter what political administration you're under, you know?
Yeah,
so that just kind of is what it is.
Right. That seems to be, I guess the question for me is like sort of popular music, like the music that my daughter listens to, which I don't know the names of any of the people. Like I know the songs probably by heart now because they're constant, but I have no idea who sings them.
I mean, hey, Katy Perry was big on the Hillary train. That was the smartest thing she ever did in her feud with Taylor Swift, in my opinion.
I don't know if Miles.
I will say that it is kind of shocking, speaking of pop music and just popular artists, it is kind of shocking how down for Bernie Cardi B is, but I'm here for it.
Right.
So it shouldn't be shocking is the thing, right?
Come on,
she's a working class woman of color. Well, she came from the working class. She's done really well for herself. She hasn't forgotten where she comes from. Like, she should be supporting Bernie.
But is there...
She also happens to be really...
But just like, like someone like Nicki Minaj comes from a lot of those same roots as well, and it seems like she couldn't give a crap.
Well, here's the difference, is Cardi B is actually just happens to be personally extremely politically and historically oriented.
And she happens
some
to
of
be
that is just
extremely
honestly
intelligent.
Her reading habits and what she's engaged in and interested in. I mean, that's also some of the, luck of the draw.
That's also changed, right? Like you don't necessarily have to manifest your politics through your music anymore because there's so many other channels in which to communicate that are no longer, that are just not as subsidiary as they used to be. I mean, if I was a musician 25 years ago, my fans would, maybe read about me in a fanzine or in Spin or Rolling Stone. And, every now and then I'd have an interview, but it was basically just the songs that I put out. Now you can have, as an artist, an ongoing conversation with your fans that has nothing really to do directly with your art.
No, that's true. I do think that the fact that artists do have access to such a convenient medium to tell their fans whatever they want, whenever they want, it does kind of allow them to, I guess, let off some steam or just let off some pressure on issues that they might have an opinion on. And this also manifests itself in hip hop in terms of just the trend or the history of diss tracks. Like in hip hop right now, there aren't as many prominent or significant or important diss tracks as there used to be. There was just that Pusha T Drake beef, which was really significant. But part of the reason it was significant is that, sort of direct head-to-head, track-on-track, going at each other type of thing is not really as prominent a practice as it used to be. Now a lot of that steam is being let off on Instagram. where these guys are just like going at each other in one Instagram video after another.
I wish that Killer Mike would make a diss track about Joe Biden.
Oh, I also Vic Mensa's another guy. He's campaigning for Bernie, and he's done a lot of stuff in Chicago. That's another very prominent pop artist with a political orientation.
Yeah,
he was running with,
and he was on CYT recently too. He's always been pretty politically motivated.
Well, so
I don't know,
but let me ask you this: I mean, do you think that diminishes the work a little bit? Like, I mean,
in artists being politically active.
No, that we have these sort of like disposable ways in which an artist can communicate with its audience, so that it can relieve some of the those things that drive artists, and they don't necessarily have to put it in the work. They're sort of their primary art. I mean, I'm just thinking of myself back when I was in that sort of type of field where it was like I would do some sitcom work and needed to balance it out with, some stuff that I did on my own that I thought was, better. I don't know that it was or not, but my point is that for me as an artist to fulfill myself, I needed to do certain things and express certain things, and it would force me to do certain projects. Whereas we're living in a world now where, for musicians, they're trying to express feelings that they have through their music, right? I mean, that's what's definitional about them. But if they can actually let the air out of the tire in some areas, I wonder if that diminishes their work. I mean, what's your sense of that?
I think it does kind of loop back to the sentiment I expressed earlier about things being a little bit more sanitized and risk averse. And I think that social media, as you're kind of indicating here, does contribute to that in that if you really want to get a message out there, I could either A, put it in a song that for the health of my career, I need to hit, I need to chart, I need my audience to like it, but I don't know if they're going to want to hear this message. I could do it there, I could put it there, or I could put it in a tweet or in an Instagram update. And while, yeah, maybe in a sense we do lose the potential of, hey, we could have had a really great song about street violence or police brutality or a host of other things. Simultaneously, writing songs about this stuff isn't always the most effective way to convey a message when at the end of the day, you don't just want people to hear a song, you want them to get the message. And I think social media and the fact that people can access really robust opinions on a lot of leftist issues is more significant to the political conversation than just merely being able to have maybe a hit or a popular song about a particular issue. Just for example, when I used to go to protests or, involve myself in leftist groups when I was in high school or in college, the kinds of conversations that just people like AOC or Bernie have brought to the fold now is really only the types of conversations I would hear there. Now those conversations are kind of being had everywhere. You have
right.
Half of the Democratic field right now copying that stuff. And that's thanks to the discussion that the internet is allowing, not because, a song has kind of opened people up to the idea. I mean, music and the political messages it can convey are important. And, a lot of the records that I tend to praise year in and year out do have like a political or a social angle or a message. I mean, I praise that. I love that. I celebrate that. But, it's not like a make or break for music in my view. It doesn't dictate whether or not music is actually good. And the artists who really kind of have a message in their heart that they have to get out there that does have a social edge to it, they're going to communicate it in their music, whether it's going to sell or not. Like Jamie said earlier, the band Idols, they were making the kind of music and conveying the kind of messages that they were before they were a popular band. You know what I mean? And if that's what you're going to do, that's what you're going to do consistently, whether you're successful with it or not.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't really occurred to me, but years back I had several conversations with Fran Lebowitz where she was insistent that that political change has got to come from cultural sources like musicians and whatnot, and she was not seeing it. And I wonder, she also was at least at that time, and I imagine this has continued, extremely reluctant to engage in any technology. And I wonder if if social media has now, rather than draining from music its political import, has just simply expanded upon what an artist puts out there and is just is sort of an adjacent medium to influence politics, because social media, I mean, clearly is a part of our culture, and I guess things have gotten much more political. I'm not, it's hard to sort of read as to what would have happened if Hillary Clinton was in office. Would we continue to have this level or a significant increase in the sort of politicization that we see amongst artists?
I'll add to your friend's description of politics and music and the relation to culture by saying, yes, politics is certainly downstream from culture, and I will agree that music itself is culture, but generally I would separate music itself from popular or commercial music, especially music coming out on major labels, because there are so many degrees of separation between the rawness of what your average person is thinking and a hit record that may have been combed through dozens of times before it actually ended up seeing release. I would argue that commercial music is downstream from culture as well. In a lot of respects, commercial music is a reflection of what the public wants, because what does and doesn't land on the chart and what is or isn't being released on commercial labels is a reflection of, trends and, consumer trends that labels are keeping track of every single day.
I've had this argument with people a bunch of times because, I really hate, well, I don't hate all of it, but corporate pop music is not my thing. And, there are people who think if you don't like the kind of music, the kind of commercial pop that's crammed down the throat of, teenage girls, that you're somehow, sexist and ageist. And
no, you're just not with it.
I can't imagine, I would rather the industry respect teenage girls enough to give them something to listen to that's not total garbage.
Oh, teenage girls want to listen to Tracy Chapman. Yeah, sure. Whatever. Keep up with the cool music.
The
kids like the cool stuff.
I'm going to enjoy this moment where I'm a little bit hipper than Jamie about what's going on in the young teenage girl music
Force
scene.
15-year-olds.
All right, but wait a second. That brings up the point here. Let's get down to brass tacks, Anthony. I need to impress folks when I go out and about. I don't want to say my dating pool, but I need to go out and impress people with my musical acumen. But I have a limited, narrow perspective on what I like, and I think Brendan has, given you a sense of what that was as part of our pre-interview process that we do around here. So what do you recommend that I could listen to that would project someone who is not so stuck in, mired in the music that was formative for him? Or is that impossible?
I could throw some real hip stuff at you that maybe you wouldn't vibe with if you really just want to.
Well, I can pretend that I'm vibing with it. I mean, I'm capable.
Yeah, listen to the new Tyler the Creator album, Igor. That would be really hip of you.
Wait a second. Why is everyone laughing?
If all you want to do is be hip and be relevant, just listen to the Tyler the Creator album, Igor, and it's a good breakup. It's a good breakup record too. So.
Tyler Creator.
Right. Big Sean also has a good breakup.
Is that Tyler Creator? Is that his last name, or is it Tyler the Creator? Is his last name?
It's just Tyler the Creator.
Okay.
It's just a stage name.
It's a come after Tyler.
Now let's say I want to take it down a notch and not be so hip, but maybe I want to just be able to listen to the music without having to sort of consciously project that I like it.
Yeah, I think, given some of the stuff Ben told me in an email before the interview,
why did you
I
laugh
think the record that
when you said that? I'm stuck in sort of 90s. I mean, my musical tastes started, I think I started to engage in music when I was in 7th grade, which started with Velvet Underground. and I think ended probably when I was like, I stopped seeing shows more or less in my early 30s, and so more or less ended with like Velvet Underground. And
I have a solid recommendation for you.
What's that?
I would recommend that you maybe try out the new album from Purple Mountains. Have you heard of this record?
Oh, Brendan's very upset because that's what he told me too. The new Purple Mountains. Okay.
Yeah, Purple Mountains. It's self-titled. It's a band led by a singer-songwriter whose name is David Berman, and he used to be in a group named Silver Jews, who I don't know. I mean, being a '90s dude, have you heard of them before?
We were just talking about them the other day. I didn't really know them that well. No.
Yeah, they're more on the obscure side. They're kind of like a lo-fi indie rock and folk group. David tends to write these songs that are very dry, very witty, very wordy, very I guess a lot of observational humor in some of his lyrics as well. And I believe Stephen Malkmus from Pavement was affiliated with Silver Jews for a little bit as well. So there's, kind of that deep 90s indie rock, lo-fi kind of connection there.
Anthony.
But
I may be a little bit like earlier than that. Like maybe like, I mean, the album I've probably listened to more in my entire life, and I still listen to it, would be Let It Be by The Replacements. That's basically it. Like I still listen to that album on a regular basis when I can't think of anything else to listen to.
I can't think of any rock bands like that have come out with records this year. They're like really embodying that Replacements-esque kind of vibe. And the Replacements are such a unique group because they were just like so really in a lot of respects, they're kind of like proto-alternative rock. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like they were sort of like in a weird creative limbo period where they were on the cusp of something that developed into something else. You know what I mean? But still, I mean, given that you are into some of the artists that Ben told me about, I do think you will dig that Purple Mountains record. I think you might also like the new Bill Callahan record. It's a really good singer-songwriter album.
Bill Callahan. Yep.
And also an Australian singer-songwriter just came out with this really great covers album that I personally think is amazing. It's called Return to Center, and his name is Kieran J. Callanan.
Okay. Return to Center.
Oh, I saw him once.
Anthony, Anthony, I'm sorry. There's something that's been bugging a lot of us for a long time. Sam is a pure 90s thing. Claims to not know Ace of Bases. Do you believe that?
That's kind of hard to believe. That's sort of like not knowing what Savage Garden is, if you're kind of like a 90s person.
Who's Savage Gardens?
We played this game for a while.
Yeah, no, I thought Ace of Base was that the white rapper guy, like those guys.
Oh, I thought it was Snow.
No, not Snow. I can't remember. Third Base. I knew.
Yeah, that's the Ace of Base. All that she wants is another baby. You know that song?
I never heard that.
Nothing.
What about I? Okay.
Honestly,
it's not a big deal.
Don't bother, man. Trust me, we've been down this road.
Yeah.
Well, again, the Kieran J. Callanan record is.
Oh, I know that song.
Well, I've got that down. So right now I'm doing Tyler, the Creator, if I need to really get out, and Purple Mountains, and Return to the Center. The Bill Callahan thing I already have. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you get to the end and you want more, it's always a good idea to listen to Death Grips. Just saying.
Death Grips.
I mean,
I have a few recommendations for everybody else. I have Michael needs to listen to the new Freddie Gibbs and Madlib.
Freddie Gibbs and Madlib. Okay.
Yeah, you got to listen to that if you haven't already. Jamie, I don't know if you've listened to Drab Majesty yet.
Oh yes.
Yes, their new record's good. Also, have you heard the new Black Midi record, Schaugenheim?
No.
They're like a really good kind of dark post-punky math rock band from the UK.
That sounds good.
And I know math rock's kind of annoying to some people, but this is totally different.
Cool, I'll check it out.
And also, you probably already heard this, but have you listened to the new Lingua Ignota record yet?
No, but you are not the first person who's told me to listen to it.
you have to listen to it. It's like insane.
Hell
and
yeah. Man,
Matt, I saw on.
I'm so out of the
Go
loop
on.
with music these days. I used to be a music writer, and now I just listen to podcasts because politics have completely broken my brain. And so I rely on my friends and folks like you to tell me what to listen to now. So thank you.
Yes, listen to the new Lingua Ignota Caligula. It's pretty intense. Matt, I saw, did a tweet about moshing in Pelosi's office, so I just got together some records he can mosh to.
Okay.
It's not new, but it's a really good record. Power Trip, Nightmare Logic. It's a really good thrash metal record. The new Tomb Mold album, Planetary Clairvoyance, is a really badass death metal record with a lot of great riffs on it. And this Japanese band called Otoboke Beaver, Itakoma Hits. It's like this really great noise pop and experimental punk record with a lot of shouty, like female gang choruses. They sort of sound like a cross between a speedy punk band and like a Japanese cheerleader group.
Ooh.
And Ben
Sounds real good.
needs to keep streaming Lil Nas's.
Brendan.
Keep streaming Lil Nas X's "Old Town Road" so that it's #1 and it continues to be the longest running #1 single of all time.
Oh,
so
hell
that's my
yeah. Hard cosign on that.
And just to be clear before I let you go, Anthony, Bono is not dead. Is that right?
Bono's alive.
Okay.
Michael Stipe is still alive. Moby is still alive.
We interviewed Michael Stipe back in the day on the Majority Report. Yeah, he came in. He was friends with Janine.
That's a big one.
And I saw them. They played my spring fling at college back when they were just coming from Athens.
No, stop it.
Oh my God, losing my religion.
It makes me angry.
That would have been before losing my religion, right?
Oh yeah, no. This was. This was when they were just touring band playing colleges.
I thought that was the only song they
in
did.
1980. This was like 86, I think they came.
Yeah, that would have been their first couple of records, and they were just sort of considered a college rock band.
Exactly. That's basically it. That's the wheelhouse. Well, Anthony, this has been a pleasure. I really appreciate it, man. Folks can check out, can find you on the Needle Drop at any time, apparently.
At any time. It's the YouTube channel runs 24 hours a day.
There you go. That's pretty good. Good job with that, incidentally. We got to figure out how to do that with ours. Anthony, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks. We got a little bit of time for the fun half. We're going to take a quick break, head into that fun half. Just a reminder, you can support this program by becoming a member, by going to Join the Majority Report. There, you will have the opportunity to become a member of the program for just pennies a day. Pennies. I mean, that's a very wide open amount of pennies. It's plural.
The most versatile currency.
Exactly. You can get it. You can get super granular with pennies. And for just pennies a day, we give you extra content every day. And you support this program, and you get it all commercial free. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Don't forget to listen to the AM Quickie. It's on your Majority Report feed, the audio feed. You can check it out. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY. As always, you can always check our show notes for any type of coupon deals or discounts that we get from our advertisers. Today is Friday, which means that Tuesday is some other day. It either happened or will happen. Michael.
We had on, we had on Crystal Ball. We talked about the anti-Bernie bias, MSNBC, and the professionalization of the Democratic Party and why that makes them such wuss bags. Then Joshua Kahn, who is...
He's the guru.
He's the guru. He's a frontline organizer. We did our second lessons in the actual tactics of movement building, activism. He told some incredible stories, including from work they did in Arpaio's, Arizona, which is the prototype of what's happening nationally in terms of anti-ICE and detention actions. Really quick, we're doing obviously a Monday show because we have two debates, Tuesday and Wednesday night. So TMBS will be Monday at 7. Brooke Thomas from TYT, and then I just recorded an interview with Celso Amorim, who is Lula's foreign minister and Dilma's defense minister, and he has a lot of thoughts on the rise of the global far right and what the political strategy is to synchronize against it, and insight as to what's happening in Brazil right now. So patreon.com/TMBS, Michael Brooks Show on YouTube.
Jamie.
This week on the Antifada, we had on Cinzia Arruzza and Tithi Bhattacharya, two authors of Feminism for the 99%, a manifesto, to talk about feminism in all its current forms, a topic very near and dear to my heart, and why, if we're going to be truly feminist, we also have to be anti-racist and anti-capitalist, and why that's all connected. And I'm really stoked on this episode, and I hope everybody listens to it. We also poured one out for Aussie Fest, which was sadly canceled this past weekend. Boo hoo.
What? Aussie Fest was canceled?
Oh, you didn't hear that? De Blasio canceled it because Beto was going to be there. Or
if De Blasio actually, if he was just like,
they
I heard that
Aussie Fest.
If De Blasio was like,
you know what that sounds like? You know what that sounds like to me? Ticket sales sucked, and we need an excuse.
That sounds to me like De Blasio's getting serious. Make Con Ed public.
It's going to be traffic problems.
So wait, did De Blasio cancel it?
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually did. He said it was because of the heat. It would be a public health danger.
I had no...
And really, it was just like, I heard that little bitch Beto's coming to my city.
Also,
I put a ratio on Twitter that
they were commandeering a public park for, I believe, 9 days beforehand to set it up. So that rubbed some people the wrong way.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I hear those
Fest.
ads on the radio for Aussie, for that site. And that is just like, how much money...
It's a corporate psyop.
...do they have?
Too much.
It's honestly like, I didn't hear about it. They've been around for like 5 or 6 years, right?
Yeah.
I didn't hear about it until you went last year. And then like I start to hear the ads, and it's always this like, how many pancakes does Japan put out every year? Find out facts like this and more on Aussie Reports. It's news you can use. And it's just like weird, sort of like really clever, you know.
It's just noise.
Contrarian,
it's corporate noise.
Sort of like factoids.
It's a lost leader for neoliberalism, I would say.
I guess.
You basically just need to use people's time while they continue to consume.
It's stunning. The like what passed as news, like, you know, like what? Did you know the number one import of Canada is not, you know, the export of Canada is not maple syrup? It's just like weird. I don't know.
Yeah, before I found out that it was de Blasio who canceled it, I just figured that the festival had, you know, read my piece from last year and taken my critiques to heart and thought about their life and thought about their choices and packed it in.
Just sounds to me like there was no ticket sales, and they just went to de Blasio and said, cancel it on us.
And he was just like, why would I do that? You invited Beto O'Rourke. I'm candidate de Blasio, which means all of a sudden I'm not a weird beanstalk guy. I actually have some balls.
Exactly.
To be fair, it was incredibly hot last weekend, but I like your theories better.
Saturday, Literary Hangover. We're doing The Pioneers, part 1 of 2-part episode, because this is a really rich book, basically about how commodification is a necessity before people will allow settlers to settle new land. Basically, yeah, James from Mark Cooper, check it out. So first of the Leatherstocking Tales. So if you're familiar with The Last of the Mohicans, this is a better book than that one is.
All right, folks. See you in the fun half. All right, folks. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder. I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
Psych. Fuck them. Fuck them. Almost says what? Almost says what? Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black Africans. The alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
You see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy! I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Ah, God.
Holds
Song
up
is
so
awesome.
well.
I could listen to that all the time, but that's not as good at dinner parties as the new song recommendations I have.
Look at you. You got some pep in your step.
Oh, yeah.
Very nice.
You don't just play Danarchy at your house parties?
Well, I used to.
You could play that song. Like, you can play that. That song actually, not on repeat, but like that can actually work.
I think that's been the problem. I tried to do it on repeat, and
It's better the sixth time.
let's go directly to the phones. Look at who got in right at the top. Look at this guy. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Ronald Reagan.
Look at you, Ronald Reagan. You're really just standing there completely ignoring all the work that your clients need you to do.
Well, I wouldn't say that necessarily, but thanks for that intro. I wanted to. You've been talking a lot about what happens when there's a vacuum, like if the Democrats aren't talking about impeachment, then it will be filled with something else, right?
Correct.
Right. So I want to talk about a particular vacuum that exists as of this week, which is the resistance mom sex symbol vacuum, which exists now that Robert Mueller has sort of like been revealed to be this maybe like sundowning old guy.
Right.
Who's not very impressive.
Bit of a paper tiger.
Like, have you heard of the... Exactly. So have you heard of the podcast Muller, She Wrote?
Yes, I have actually.
Oh, God. Of course that's a real thing.
What's that?
So the description is, Muller, She Wrote, is a binder full of women unraveling the mysteries of the Mueller investigation. So anyways, there's this whole like subculture, right, that exists, and now they need somewhere to turn. And I just feel like you're the perfect resistance mom sex symbol.
Oh, well, thank you.
And this sort of dovetails perfectly into 2022. Your run against Chuck Schumer. So I'm just trying to figure out, and I'll take your answer off the air, some ways that we can really start to get you out there and promote Sam Seder as the new
choices. We just
Robert
did that.
Mueller.
So wait, well, how do you propose that I assume my position as the resistance mom's, what did you call it? Resistance mom's sex symbol. Sex symbol. He hung up. All right.
I feel like you might not be the best equipped person to answer this question. Maybe you should get like a personal brand consultant.
Wear more Adidas.
Well, you can't yet.
406.
You got to get you to the position where you can wear more Adidas.
406 area code.
Hi, this is ASAP Houdini.
Nice.
Welcome to the show, Mr.
Wow.
Houdini.
Thank you. I actually wanted to ask you your thoughts. I don't know if you've heard, if it's actually huge news. Maybe I'm making it a bigger deal than it needs to be. But Portland has pushed forward their plans to ban masked protesters like Antifa in an effort to crack down on quote-unquote violent clashes. This all comes basically a year after one of the main people who's advocating for this masked protest ban is Danielle Outlaw, the police chief in Portland. A year ago, roughly, she was talking about how basically after another one of these clashes happened that Antifa protesters were whining and complaining because the police officers, quote unquote, kicked their butts. So I just thought maybe there's some personal things going on here that might actually be conflicting also. And what the heck is the point in banning the masks anyways? I don't think that'll help much.
Well, I'm not sure what it's supposed to help. I know they did this during, I think it was the RNC in 2004. I think they did that in New York. I'm pretty sure they did it in Minnesota. I mean, they've done it in different places. And I think, I mean, look, I think, you know, I understand the desire for certain people when they go out there, if they're doing counter protests or protests, period, to not be recorded by the police. The police should not be doing this, in my estimation, anyways.
Or the fascists.
Or you know, or anybody, obviously, but like,
to the degree that the police and the fascists are two separate entities.
Right. But I think you can't stop private citizens from going around with their video cameras and taking videos, right? But you should be able to say to the police, hey, wait a second. There's no possible reason why you should be videotaping protests. Like, I know that they have in New York library full of videos of protests. And I like, to what end? Like, how is that? Well, we know, but I'm saying, to what possible legitimate end would that be? Now, with that said, I think people are going to probably figure out a way of going around. I mean, look, you're allowed to wear makeup, right? They're not going to make it an outlaw to wear. You're not going to outlaw you to wear makeup in Portland. And
Actually,
I imagine
they might.
People
imagine.
What do you mean?
Portland's very woke.
I mean, I actually did see an article the other day about how Juggalos makeup is actually scrambling the government's like face recognition technologies. So maybe our future lies through joining the Juggalo gang. Insane Clown Posse.
I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see like more makeup in that situation and things like, you know, fake mustaches and, you know, I mean, there's no way ultimately you're going to be able to find stuff. It's not going to be quite as convenient. It's not going to give you the protection maybe it would from like, you know, tear gas and whatnot, but you keep a bandana in your pocket, I imagine. I'm just speculating as to what they're going to do. But yeah, that kind of stuff I find troublesome.
I just think it's odd that the police chief is, you know, been consistently siding with the police over Antifa, who who are always on the side.
Wait
of
a second. Did you just say that you think it's odd that the police chief has been siding with the police over Antifa?
Not odd, but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be.
Wow.
Well, they're not just siding with the police; they're siding with the fascists, right?
Well, listen, I appreciate the call. I mean,
Yeah.
I get your point, but I mean, I don't think it.
You stop siding with yourself.
No, I
God
mean,
damn it.
people say
you don't do that
people
anymore.
say, oh, like these fascists that are doing really scary stuff, especially in the Pacific Northwest right now. Oh, they're just LARPers, they're distraction, don't worry about them. I'm worried about them for a number of reasons, but probably the most disturbing one is the degree to which the police and, the official arms of state power are aligned with them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's disturbing. Donald Trump was at TPUSA, as we discussed earlier in the program. And this is a little bit disturbing. Well, I mean, look, we've seen him do this before, but he stopped for a couple of years. And now he's making this claim again. And I will say that, when I've been reading into the this Senate report, there's very little that's out there in terms of the Senate report. And one of the things that people felt in the past that oddly protected our election system was the fact that we have so many disparate systems across the country. And I think at the end of the day, that's a rather, at least in terms of national elections, a pretty narrow and naive perspective, because again, it's really very limited number of places where you could impact the outcome of election. We saw that in 2016 in terms of just how close things can be and how targeted, if you wanted to be. I don't know if that they were, but targeted, target specific areas of the country that are going to be in play. It occurred to me that one of the things that the Trump administration was trying to do was to centralize voter data rolls in one place. That might make things convenient. I mean, they had their own agenda, which was also basically to disenfranchise voters in specific locations. I don't know if Russia or any other entity that wanted to break into our things would have that level of savvy. I'm being facetious. Of course they do. And if they didn't have it, then they would have been given it by people who do have that savvy. But I raise that only because for a couple of years, Donald Trump was on talking about how it was millions of illegal immigrants, according to him, voted, which would brought about the Chris Kobach attempt to disenfranchise voters across the country. Apparently, he's back on it. And for those people who are trying to make an argument that Donald Trump is not going to leave the White House if he loses the election quietly, I think this is more evidence of that case. I don't think he has the military might to stay in office, but Bill Barr may file a couple of lawsuits. I mean, who knows where this could lead? But here he is in front of the college students explaining exactly how it was that he didn't really lose the popular vote.
They're saying all of this stuff, and then those illegals get out and vote because they vote anyway. Don't kid yourself. Those numbers in California and numerous other states, they're rigged. You got people voting that shouldn't be voting.
Listen to the cheer.
Young fascists.
They vote many times, not just twice, not just 3 times. They vote, it's like a circle. They come back, they put a new hat on. They come back, they put a new shirt on. And in many cases, they don't even do that.
This guy's like he's like basing this on a cartoon that he saw.
Not good. We're going to vote again, man. Going to the circle. I'm going to do my second lap around the circle.
I don't have another hat. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry. Put on the Groucho glasses. You vote again.
We are going to drive up that
Like-
popular vote total so much. Yeah, no, they were trying to get us to go on a bus to Wisconsin. Fuck that. She'll win the moral victory.
I have like
Let's vote again.
I have like a synthetic memory now of like a droopy dog cartoon where he's like running a election. He's like watching an election and like people are going around the block and he's like, wait a second.
Exactly.
Wait a second. Why do all the people around those blocks look so similar? That was the same one as before.
You got a top hat on this time.
We were talking about impeachment. Here's Nancy Pelosi this morning addressing this question of impeachment. I mean, for the life of me, I have no idea where she's going with this. There are now 96 Democratic representatives who've come out. One of them is Catherine Clark. She is in the leadership, at least, of the Democrats in the House. I mean, not necessarily, I think with the re-elect campaign. Nevertheless, she's a Democratic leadership member who apparently has been released by Nancy Pelosi or not. There's a lot of reports that Gerald Nadler is getting into more and more heated exchanges with Pelosi over this. He is beginning to feel the heat himself as there is a primary candidate who's announced and has at this point been primarily running, as far as I can tell, on this question of impeachment. And this came up, I think, in our conversation with Sean McElwee at Netroots Nation. This is another value to primarying, even primarying congresspeople who are more or less okay, right? Like the whole idea is you want to deploy your resources where they're needed the most. But I think there is a very strong argument that primarying candidates who you may even like, basically keep them, I don't want to say honest, but will give them at least another arrow in their quiver or another reason or an incentive to pursue policies that you want to see implemented. Here is Nancy Pelosi, for some reason, wearing mistletoe at the on the House today.
Sam Brock.
Speaker. In the aftermath of the Muller hearing, you said that you want to focus on what you're doing in the courts. Now, some of your Democratic colleagues believe you're simply trying to run out the clock on impeachment. Are you trying
That's
to run
not
out
true.
the clock?
No, I'm not trying to run out the clock. Let's get sophisticated about this, okay?
Oh.
Okay?
But how long
Would
do you
that
think
be?
these fights will take?
We will proceed when we have what we need to proceed, not one day sooner. And everybody has the liberty and the luxury to espouse their own position and to criticize me for trying to go down the path in the most determined, positive way. Again, their advocacy for impeachment only gives me leverage. I have no complaint with what they are doing. But I know Mueller, I keep calling him Special Counsel Mueller. Mr. Mueller said the other day, confirmed in the public mind that the president has obstructed justice. You know what he said. He could have exonerated him. He would have, he didn't. But he was not able to investigate the president's finances, personal, business, or otherwise, and that is what we are doing in the courts. So I'm willing to take whatever heat there is there to say when the decision will be made in a timely fashion. This isn't endless. And when we have the best, strongest possible case, and that's not endless either. I mean, it may be endless in terms of the violations of the law that the president is engaged in. But that's what I say to you.
In all honesty, I feel like I could sit down with that piece of video for an hour and a half and not be able to tell you what she's talking about. And I don't know if she's being deliberately evasive in that. Like, she clearly thinks that there is some threshold of information that has not been crossed. She can't possibly think that she's going to get that threshold through the courts. If the Democrats wanted to see Donald Trump's taxes, they could see Donald Trump's taxes from New York State. Yesterday, they could see them. Richard Neal didn't want to. If they wanted to look into the finances, they could do that. They could have done that yesterday. If they are worried that their subpoenas are not being pursued with any vigor or taken seriously by the administration, there is one recourse for them: to start an impeachment inquiry, which the courts have already made clear it advantages subpoenas over subpoenas that are issued in a non-impeachment inquiry. So, I mean, in part, I think she's just sort of like lying, but she can't even see it. We're at the point now where like there doesn't even seem to be an effort to offer a cohesive argument against. Like, I don't know what it is. And it's clearly they're trying to run out the clock. Now, maybe from her perspective, maybe the requirement is, I need assurances from Chuck Schumer that we're not going to have 10 or 12 Democratic senators voting against impeachment hearings or voting against the articles of impeachment if it shows up in the Senate. Or maybe the idea is that like, oh, we're going to start impeachment proceedings in, July of 2020 so that there'll be no time to vote on it. I don't know.
I just think, I don't know either, but I just think, keep it simple in the sense that they are obviously trying to run out the clock on any number of things. I think that they're quite confident and cocky about beating Donald Trump, and they are absolutely risk averse and incredibly cowardly and timid. And so these other factors might be a consideration, but I just think it's as simple as like, they have their limited case studies. They probably are thinking of Clinton in '98, even though it's really not a good comparison at all. It's like a shockingly bad comparison. And I'm a little bit more skeptical. I support impeachment, but I'm not as gung-ho about it as other people are at all. But that's a stupid comparison in my opinion. I think that they want nothing that could disrupt gliding into 2020. Right. That's it. But all these other things though about, like I'm saying, like, yeah, I guess what I'm trying to just say is I just think we can't, sure, like he's just so ludicrous, but Pelosi and Schumer are a unit. I mean, and she's not trying to protect him. I
don't know if that's the case. I mean, the evidence arguing that they're not a unit would be the border bill, right? Because she certainly thought that they were going to fight the border bill. And they passed one that they liked in the House. They sent it to the Senate. And that border bill died. They brought up Mitch McConnell's. It won something like 89-11, which means that 30 some odd Democrats voted for it. There's no way.
Schumer came out and said, I'm shocked that the House passed it. He said the same thing a couple weeks ago.
But the House has to pass it.
I understand.
If your senator
yes, I get it.
votes against the bill. And so that is evidence to me that they're not on the same page and that she cannot rely on Chuck Schumer. Now, I haven't seen any reporting to that effect, and it may behoove her to not do that because obviously there's nobody complaining in the Senate. But
she's more focused on reining in an AOC and doing that than she is in this short-term struggle.
Well, I'm sure she wants to defeat
Donald
I'm not defending
Trump.
Nancy Pelosi. I'm trying to describe a dynamic. If she sees that she's not able to do anything because she's hampered by Chuck Schumer, it is much easier for her to pick on 4 freshman congresspeople, make that the story of the day, rather than trying to go after Chuck Schumer, who she cannot success. There's no success in that.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say quickly, like we don't know what's in the mind of Pelosi, but we do know what her priorities the staff that she has with Drew Hamill,
indeed,
and the staff of Hakeem Jeffries have, and it is to go after the left.
It's like what Grimm said. Grimm said, look, these people are more interested in not even running the House, but in internal control of one half of the House.
I still think if she really, really were smart about trying to get internal control, though, she would not be playing into their hands. Like, she's kind of right they're only 4 votes. They don't have that much power. A lot of their power comes from their base, and it comes from social media, and it comes from the attention that they're getting. And by making that a story, she is ceding that ground to them. And I feel like it's only going to help them in the long run.
In the long run, it may. But I think, in the short term, I think it just gives her something to talk about. Like, it's like... that
you need content, baby.
Exactly.
She seemed like she was trying to run the clock out on that statement just now.
No kidding.
We need some content.
Speaking of which, right, like, can we get sophisticated here? So I'm about to say something that's completely incoherent, but I want to make it clear to you up front. The reason why you don't understand it is because it's sophisticated.
Yeah, if you don't accept it, it's because you don't understand it.
Right. So, not completely unrelated, there is a sophisticated critique of Ilhan Omar that she is is racist towards white people and to Jews. Remember,
Ilhan Omar, that all white people should have ankle bracelets on them until we figure out what the hell is going on.
We know that in her response to the introduction of federal legislation that would force anyone doing business with the federal government to sign a pledge that they would not protest against Israel, she said, I don't feel like it's right for me to have to sign a pledge. We know that she was smeared then with this critique of calling for that she was claiming that Jews had dual loyalty. She was talking about herself as a person who's not Jewish, or anybody for that matter, who's going to do business with 26 states that have legislation to this effect, or the federal government, that they should not have to sign a pledge, that they're not going to protest against, Israel or any other country for that matter, or any other business. I'm not going to, get federal contracts. I have to pledge not to protest against Walmart. I mean, give me a break. Well, here's the latest version. Ilhan Omar was on with Mehdi Hassan on Al Jazeera English on Mehdi's program and Out Front. And here is the video that Marco Rubio, who's still hurting probably because his federal pledge legislation is not going to be law. Marco Rubio shared. This is where Ilhan Omar claims, or supposedly, that we should monitor white people, which I reserve the right to say is maybe not necessarily a bad idea. But go ahead.
A lot of conservatives in particular would say that the rise in Islamophobia is a result not of hate, but of fear, a legitimate fear, they say, of quote-unquote jihadist terrorism, whether it's Fort Hood or San Bernardino or the recent truck attack in New York. What do you say to them?
I would say our country should be more fearful of white men across our country, because they are actually causing most of the deaths within this country. We should be profiling, monitoring, and creating policies to fight the radicalization of white men.
So there you have it. She has said, she stated the fact that in terms of domestic terrorism, at least, and then I would imagine, in other areas, but specifically
violence
in terms
general.
of domestic terrorism, we should be afraid of white people, which is simply factually true. More people have died at the hands in the past 10 years of domestic white domestic terrorists than anything else. Probably domestic terrorism in the modern era. We should be concerned about white Americans. And then she went on to say that we should monitor and surveil white people. Now, that seems to be a little bit hypocritical, because I would imagine she wouldn't say that we should be doing that for other people.
We should not be monitoring and spying like that on any group.
Yes,
period.
It's a little bit hypocritical, but I did notice there was a white flash.
Yeah, it was
in between there. And sometimes that becomes, I don't know if that's, for a while I thought that was just a sign that my name had been cut out of something, but apparently it just suggests that something's been cut out.
We need to talk to Sam Seder
Here we go.
and others.
Here is that comment actually as it was relayed to Mehdi Hasan?
A lot of conservatives in particular would say that the rise in Islamophobia is a result not of hate, but of fear, a legitimate fear, they say, of quote-unquote jihadist terrorism, whether it's Fort Hood or San Bernardino or the recent truck attack in New York. What do you say to them?
I would say our country should be more fearful of white men across our country, because they are actually causing most of the deaths within this country. And so if fear was the driving force of policies to keep America safe, Americans safe inside of this country, we should be profiling, monitoring, and creating policies to fight the radicalization of white men.
But most of the...
Pause it for 1 second. So I just want to be clear. What they cut out was her introduction to that point about monitoring white men, which was, if we're going to allow fear to dictate what our policy is, that's what we would do.
Yeah,
and
but
then,
who's fear?
Well, just fear. But here, now continue.
I don't support monitoring at a fucking fair.
Most of the funding and attention, even under Obama, obviously went towards Muslim communities. One of those communities is in Minnesota, your state, the Somali American community in Minnesota, where I think over the past few years, more than 20 young Somali Americans have left to go and fight for ISIL or Al-Shabaab or one of these quote-unquote jihadist groups abroad. That's a real threat, obviously. No one's pretending it's not a threat. So what do you do about it?
But I mean, I think, like I said, the focus of our policies should be about keeping Americans safe, keeping us domestically safe, and where we actually find a solution is looking at our foreign policy, looking at how we are engaging with the members of these communities, and the kind of rhetoric, right, like that is being spewed out of leaders within our city halls, within our state capitals, and within our nation's capital.
So there you have it. So
Queen.
I was really I was wondering, because she wrote I think she actually has a piece in the New York Times saying it's not enough to just reject Trump's racism. We need to deliver for economic justice, basically, for everybody. And so I was when I saw the lying clip, I was surprised, because I would she doesn't make this kind of essentialist tit for tat argument. She makes really smart arguments, and of course it was a distorted fake clip. It would be kind of cool though. This is the Nation of Islam Obama 2.0.
Gotta figure out what the hell's going on.
I, Elon Omar, propose a complete ban on construction of new Red Lobsters until we figure out what the hell is going on. Super Bowl parties will be banned and chicken wings not delivered. No, I don't hate white people, but they're bad people and we don't know. I'm sure some of them are nice people, but many of them are listening to Kenny Loggins.
Let's play this clip. This is pretty stunning. I don't, I haven't seen this in context. Let's do the Trump first, where he's telling Sean Hannity that he has decided to share, or Bill Barr has decided to share intel documents with the minority leader on the House Intelligence Committee, not necessarily the majority.
Nunez is a minority?
Here we go.
He's the Attorney General of the United States. He's got a lot of very good people under him that I guess are involved, and I gave them a total release. So all of it's been released, and he has all of it. I've also given him authorization to release it to whoever he wants, whether it's his people or, frankly, perhaps people like Devin Nunes, who is a star. What he's done and the amount of suffering he's gone through, you know what they did with him, where they tried to drive him right out of politics, and probably worse than that. He's done an incredible job.
So basically, Bill Barr is supposedly going to give this stuff to Devin Nunes. I don't know why Devin Nunes should get it as opposed to Adam Schiff. I mean, there's just you give it to both members of the committee. Well, actually, maybe I do. Here is a clip put together by The Daily Show. It's two people who seemingly talking almost in unison. It's Sean Hannity and Devin Nunez.
Welcome, everyone, to the last gasp of the Russia collusion conspiracy theory. The Democrats colluded with Russian source Bruce Orr, whose own wife worked on Fusion GPS funded by the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign, a warrant to spy on the Trump campaign. The top FBI investigator and his lover, a simple media operation. The conspiracy theory is now dead.
Boom. There you go.
That's so creepy.
Yeah, it's a little bit creepy. It's not terribly surprising. You could probably do that with almost any single talk show host and Donald Trump. All right, we got time for 2 calls, and then we'll get out of here. Let's see. Josh, I'll let you do the honors. Why don't you? We don't have numbers on it anymore. Pick a number. Pick a number between 8. All right, fair enough. Calling from an 831 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 831.
It was a very bad number.
Bad.
Tough stuff.
831. Going once.
They're eating mayonnaise.
Yeah. Going
They're
twice.
watching reality TV shows. They're having
831?
incestual relations, and I'm sure some of them are nice people.
831.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's this?
I fucking love when people answer like that. You're like, yeah. I mean, you know, you're
Who's
talking,
this?
your show. What's up?
Who's this? Goodbye.
Wow,
Hold on.
nice
We had another.
one,
We had
Josh.
another one. We got another one. 863. You calling from an 863 area code. Who's this? Where you calling from? Better answer quick.
This is Ash from Florida.
Ash from Florida. What's on your mind, Ash?
I would like to thank you guys for convincing me not to watch Demi Jor anymore.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. Good job, Josh.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. I was watching a really old debate you had about the 2012 election, and you framed voting as a decreasing suffering, the goal of it, instead of like getting everything you want right away. So I think that's what convinced me.
Oh, well, was that with Matt Stoller? We had some of those debates in 2012 where people wanted to, sit out the 2012 election.
Yeah. I don't remember his name though, but
all right. Well,
yeah. Thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you for calling and saying such a nice thing today on a Friday. Good day, sir.
You're a fucking sellout. Now you're lying about Andrew Yang.
Calling from a 626 area code. 626 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, this is Michael from Colorado.
Michael from Colorado. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Well, okay. I have a warm-up question first. So you use the word implicates a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm familiar with that. I'm familiar with the definition of that as like implicates in a crime. But sometimes it seems like that's not what you mean. So I was just wondering if you could define it for me.
Sure.
Pedantry in your face.
It means to convey or indirectly through what one says rather than stating it explicitly. It
imply is the
and that implicates
rude.
Imply but I think I might use it in the sense that just involves.
You like how you
All
like
right.
how it sounds.
Appreciate it. Okay, real question. You've said on your show that life and status, especially is the word you used, is a zero-sum game, right?
Social status on some level, yes, is a zero-sum game.
Status.
Yeah.
Okay, so I disagree with it, and I feel that by elevating someone else's social status, I'm not losing any. So I'm just wondering.
I'm glad that's the case. I'm glad that you feel
Okay.
that. But tell me, I'll give you an example. Give me your demographics.
White male.
White male. How old are you?
27.
Okay. Now, you may not feel this because you didn't grow up with this, but when I was 27, nearly every single television show that I saw as a child, do you know what the lead was? It was a white guy. Now,
the lead actor.
Yeah, the lead actors or the stories. Now, there was a couple of shows where, and I can name them, which I think almost proves my point, where the leads were not white. That was the Jeffersons, Good Times. Okay, that's it. And then there was, I think, a couple of spinoffs of those shows. Wait, what was the rerun on? What's Happening? What's Happening? So there was 3 shows.
Stipulated, Sam. Come on.
Well, my point being that the fact of the matter is that's not the case at all anymore. And there's a perfect example of how our culture has not centered people like yourself in television. It's also true with commercials. It's also true with, I think, probably in terms of literature in many respects.
And so you think because of that, I've lost some status?
Yeah.
You know,
not you.
There's no debate about
I feel like this
But-
is kind of a pedantic discussion of the definition of the word status, because status is definitionally relative. You can improve someone else's situation without taking away from your own, but status is our status relative to other people. And I think the cultural example is actually kind of a bad one to use in this case, because having cultural representation on TV is not something that improves the material circumstances of anyone.
But that's not the point. The point is, does having
other people
a
consider you to be higher status or not?
Is diminishing one's cultural status in terms of how much in the culture they are represented, is that a zero-sum game? And my answer is yes. Now, is it possible if someone controlled all of our cultural representations that they could expand the number of representations? But the bottom line is the percentage in which
it's
you look
hierarchical,
around.
and then it becomes not hierarchical. That's zero sum. There's no way around that. And I will also say that where we want to make it seem like it's only zero sum in culture, there's also a zero sum dynamic economically. Because if you look at what happened in Brazil, and you look at the complaints about what Lula's anti-poverty stuff did, rich people were complaining that they were making airports look like bus stations, right? So there is definitely a zero sum element to this. I don't know how this debate has.
Yeah, I don't even know how it's even remotely. Now, Jamie, wait a second. Before you say that none of this stuff is important, the only thing that's important is material, that's fine.
I'm not saying it's unimportant, but the material is more important.
That's fine. That's an opinion. It may be valid, but it does not implicate this conversation. And by that, I mean embroil, embesh, involve.
Well, it's the example that you used. I mean...
No. He asked me the question.
Yeah, and you answered it with this particular example.
He said...
Yeah, it was a narrow point that I got back, right?
Like, I think...
I'm saying in cultural representation, this is
wait,
true.
what are you talking about?
He's trying
what
to
are you
say-
talking about in terms of status, social status?
So I thought you meant how others perceive you in a society.
No, I'm talking about how you perceive yourself as represented in the culture, in the society.
Okay.
There are less white male congresspeople. There are less white male senators. There are less white male, I would argue, probably state legislators. I mean, I don't know. There are less white male doctors. There are less white male, every single aspect of society. Maybe there's some that's not the case. Maybe teachers hasn't changed. But in all facets of our culture, white men have lost status as defined by representation, as defined by position and whatnot. Now, that may not be relevant to anything. I happen to think it is.
Used to be relevant to what real estate they could buy.
But
Their status relative to other people.
I think that as
yes,
an individual
relative to other people. Status is definitively
that's how you measure
people.
Oh yeah, go on then.
I mean, those are the sums you're measuring to see whether they go up in proportion with the other.
Yes, of course. It's you could do it by percentage or you could do it in real numbers. But my point is, when you look around, it's just different. And it's zero sum in that way. It's not about how you feel necessarily about how you feel about yourself. Different people can react to different things. I can feel very comfortable with the idea. In fact, I do. But there's a significant, but the reality is the reality. And there are...
Yeah, and that reality helps your status. Because, for example, other people now seeing you aren't going to say, oh, you know what? He's just in that position because he's white and male. Right? They still can to some extent, but it's less so.
But
I think as that,
But that's not status. That's just an assessment of your merit.
Or your status.
No, status is a position. It is. It's a thing. It's not a feeling.
So power is a zero-sum game.
Is power a zero-sum game? I would probably argue yes.
Yeah, and deconstructing hierarchies is also zero-sum. I mean, this is...
I think, okay, maybe I know where he's going with this. Potentially. Correct me if I'm wrong, caller. The idea that by improving the situations of other groups of people, we're not losing, the privileged are not necessarily losing anything, right? Like the relatively privileged in society, right? Like say...
Isn't that definitional? Like privilege just means relative to other people that you get something that other people don't?
Like we're getting at this kind of mass politics, I think. And some people take offense to the idea that, I don't know, historically privileged groups like white people would be giving something up when what we're getting, hopefully, is some sort of social democratic program that helps everyone except the 1%.
I don't know what you're... I honestly
like
don't.
That's the context that I've heard this used in a lot.
Would be helped. And I think I agree with you. I'm not sure that I wanted to get at this, I guess, yeah. But yeah, I would say even the 1% would be helped by a more democratic social structure.
How so?
Right?
No chance in hell.
No, I want to know. How is the 1% going to be helped?
So, for instance, they might feel more secure in the knowledge that, maybe their great-grandchildren will actually survive on the planet. Yeah. Or they might think, well, the masses won't rise up and kill me because everyone's, pretty well off and fine. Right?
No.
So
that is not how they think. That is
until the Great Leap Forward comes, they're not going to think
Look,
like that.
they've always been class traders. They're few and far between, but they certainly exist.
But just the fact that they're operating, they're hailed because they're operating supposedly against their best interests.
The left. Here's the thing: the left needs to not act like it has something to offer Bill Gates. It doesn't.
It has nothing to offer Bill Gates.
Personally, I think it does. Like, I think a truly communist society where we regrow these social bonds, like even rich people have rising depression and anxiety right now because we live in such a messed up world where we're all atomized and we're all separated from each other. And I think, yes, they would be giving up their status relative to other people, but they would also have all of their material needs provided for. So status would seek to mean anything in terms of your material circumstances. And I think they'd be a lot happier. Now, would they agree with me about this? Probably not. But I'm
almost sure
not all.
I do think
they would
that
not.
Everyone
I would say they would not.
Like, I do think that this would be the best system for everyone
Jeffrey
in the long
Epstein
term.
might not, but Bill Gates might be with you.
I'm quite sure Bill Gates would not be with you.
But for now, we need to remember who our enemies are.
DSA can start a 1% outreach caucus.
I mean, look,
whether they would be helped by it or not doesn't mean they're not going to fight against it.
It is unhelpful to assume that that with a moment of clarity, people who are trying to prevent you or whose assessment of what your plan is will come around. I think it's just the bottom line is you want society to be one way, they want it to be the other, and the question is who's going to win in terms of their vision for society. And the fact of the matter is there are people who have lost status. There will people who will continue to lose status. if there is a more egalitarian society that is definitional to the whole point of an egalitarian society, when you have one that is not egalitarian.
Like the Meghan McCain world.
Whatever, whoever it is, it doesn't matter.
They're going to,
or it could be people who you are sympathetic to. It could be people who you are sympathetic to. The bottom line is pursue, what you seek for society without having to convince yourself that that there are people who just don't understand that they're actually not losing something. They are going to be losing something. And that's
okay. So I'm not saying no one will lose anything. I'm saying that it's not true that you can say that you can point at someone's race or gender or whatever and say this person will lose something. I think that's my point.
Let me ask you a question. There's 10 people who are voting. They're all white men. Okay? Now I'm going to allow 11th person because we've decided to allow women to have a vote. When there was all white men, you're one of those voters. How much of the vote did you control? 10 people.
Yeah. I mean, I get it.
10%, right? 10%. Now, if you're one of 11, how much does your vote control?
Yeah, 9. And that's a little less than 10, huh?
Exactly.
May I finish with the tweet?
Appreciate the call.
My friend Neural, underrated account, Neural Liberalism on Twitter, his pinned tweet, and I quote, is, "Started at the bottom, but because status is relative and we live in a time of increasing inequality, now I'm here in a much lower place."
Okay. I'm not sure I follow.
Just thought it was a nice button to put on the whole status conversation.
It's a Drake reference, Sam.
Oh, is it? Oh.
Oh my God.
I had no idea.
I can't. I mean, I don't know why I'm surprised at this point that Sam doesn't get musical references.
I had no idea.
It is.
I know Drake is a musician.
Crickets.
I know Drake is a musician for sure.
Oh my God.
I've definitely heard a. All right, we got one more call. I'm sorry, folks. I'm sorry. I know this is really annoying for everybody, but this person's holding. Calling from a 208 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, how are you, Sam? It's Jason in Idaho.
Jason in Idaho. Welcome to the program.
I'm a big fan of yours. They play your show at the supermarket I shop at, so I hear it pretty much every day.
They do? What supermarket is that?
One of the big ones. Anyways, I know you used to be friends with Mark Maron. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
I heard a rumor. I don't know if this is true, but I heard a rumor that he named one of his cats after you. Is that true by any chance? Could it be true?
I'm not sure. I don't know if that's the case. It could be.
Well, I mean, I just think it might be because, you're the biggest fucking boomer I've ever talked to in my life. I'll see you later.
Hey.
That was a nice palate cleanser.
So we did get him on a Friday.
Yeah, that was from the guy from Not a Show, right?
Not even a show.
Not even a show.
That was Chris James.
Yeah, there you go. That was a good way to end. Now, Brendan really, really stuck just threw the lure out there. He said, "Go to this number. It's a libertarian." And that's why I picked it up. Otherwise, I would have hung up.
I didn't know that he did that.
But I feel like that's
here's the
work
thing.
More than once.
Most people don't realize that Mark Maron's cat's name is Boomer. So there you go.
Oh, so you were avoiding asking what the name of the cat was to go right into his trap, I think.
Well, I mean, I was, I wasn't sure. Wasn't sure where he was going.
Yeah, not even
trying to help out.
That was a weird little flashback because I was watching Not Even a Show last night. Check it out on YouTube, folks.
Incidentally, I'm not a boomer. I'm late Gen X.
No, you're like the most Gen X person who's ever lived.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Gotta be. All right, folks. See you on Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you?